Hey guys, tonight we're going to tiptoe back in time, all the way to the chilly, echoing corridors of the Middle Ages, where sleep was anything but simple. Picture this outside your heavy wooden shutters. The wind groans like a shipwrecked ghost. Inside, your only company is a threadbare wool blanket, the musty scent of straw, and the occasional rat scurrying beneath the boards. You're exhausted, but sleeping here. Well, you probably won't survive this nap without at least one flea bite. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I'd love to know what corner of the world you're drifting off in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You ease open a creaking wooden door, ducking to avoid the low frame, and step into your sleeping chamber, or what passes for one. The room is small, probably just a notch wider than your wingspan, with stone walls that leak cold like a forgotten cellar. There's no insulation, no glass windows, just wooden slats, or maybe a bit of oiled cloth stretched across an opening, flapping ever so slightly. Your bed. If you're lucky, it's a simple wooden frame lashed together with rope or rough twine. On top of that lies a mattress, which is actually a sack, sometimes canvas, sometimes ticking, stuffed with straw hay, or if your household is fancy feathers that have long since given up any pretense of puff. The sack is lumpy stiff and smells of, well, everything. Old sweat, dust, the faint sweetness of dry grass, and something else that might be mold. Could be. You press your hand down into the mattress and it crunches. That's the straw. It needs to be fluffed. So you punch it a few times, rotate the whole bundle, and settle in, trying not to think about what might be nesting in the bottom layer. Now let's talk about those rats, or mice, or weasels, who's to say they scurry across the beams above, or skitter behind the walls. Sometimes you hear them mid-dream and convince yourself it's nothing. Sometimes you see their little noses peeking through the cracks, probably wondering if you're edible yet. In big towns where waste gets chucked into the streets and homes are crammed together like sardines in a jar, rats are more roommate than nuisance. Oh, and forget modern heating. Maybe there's a fireplace in the corner of your room, but odds are it's been extinguished for hours to save fuel. The stones around it are still warm, so you might shift your straw closer and huddle near them like a tired dog. Some folks bring in hot stones wrapped in cloth, a sort of DIY bed heater, but they cool quickly, and if you're clumsy, they burn you. You lie back and stare up. No ceiling fan here, just thick groaning beams overhead, usually smoked from years of fire soot, sometimes cobwebbed and always creaky. One of those spiders is definitely watching you, maybe giving you a tiny medieval thumbs up. Let's say you're a noble lucky enough to have your own room. Your bed is more impressive, probably higher off the floor with a 4-poster canopy. This is partly for status, but mostly to keep warmth in and bugs out. The curtains hang thick, trapping a little warmth around you, but also every stale scent from your body, your breath, and that bowl of pottage you didn't finish earlier. Coziness is relative. You lie in bed and pull your covers over you. That blanket is wool, rough, scratchy, dyed with something vaguely purplish and probably full of moth holes. Some are filled with fur like sheepskin or rabbit pelts stitched together. Sounds warm right, until one of those pelts starts molting and leaves fur in your mouth. Some medieval households sleep in shifts, rotating between family members, visitors, and hired hands. That bed you're in, it's been shared today already. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Changing the straw mattress or linen sheets, that's maybe a once-a-season kind of luxury unless something, let's say, tragic happened. You nestle in deeper knees, curled arms, tucked tight, still cold. The wind whispers through the cracks in the walls. You could plug them with rags, but then the room starts smelling like wet laundry. The darkness is almost total, no glow from streetlights, no hum of electronics. Just candlelight, if you can afford to burn one that long. Most people can't, so you shut your eyes in pure silent blackness and try to drift off. Historians still argue whether the average peasant managed much real rest at all. Some claim medieval folk slept better than we do. No screen time, no caffeine, no doom scrolling. Others point out that discomfort pests and constant physical exhaustion made every night more of a collapse than a cozy ritual. Oh, and did we mention that you're sleeping in your clothes? Most people do, especially peasants. It keeps the cold at bay and saves time in the morning. Also, why undress when you might need to leap up midnight to deal with livestock fires or robbers? Even nobles, when they do change into nightclothes, keep them minimal. A linen shift, maybe a wool tunic, sometimes just their underthings, and occasionally nothing at all, which is fine, unless your house catches fire, or your chamber door bursts open with a message from the steward, or a goose wanders in because your latch is faulty and nobody fixes things around here. You sigh and close your eyes. Outside, a distant church bell chimes the hour. Maybe it's midnight, maybe it's later. It doesn't matter. You're tired but sleep. That might still be a while off. The straw beneath you shifts again. You feel a soft pop, maybe just a seed pod bursting, maybe something else. But you stay still, because rolling over means shifting your whole body into a new lumpy terrain. And besides, you've finally found a patch that feels marginally less awful. You try not to breathe too deeply. The wool stinks. Your nose itches. Your feet are cold. And yet somewhere between the hum of silence, the crackle of old straw, and the weight of utter darkness, you begin to drift. Not into dreams yet, but into that half-sleep. That old strange kind of rest. The kind medieval people knew well. The kind where the body still aches, the toes still twitch, but the mind finally begins to float. You stir in the dark, not fully awake, but no longer asleep either. The air feels different, thicker, maybe colder, or maybe it's the silence that's shifted. Something is off. You blink and realize it's still the dead of night, but your mind wide awake. Welcome to your first sleep. In medieval times, you don't sleep in one long block. Instead, your night is split neatly in two, what scholars call segmented sleep. The first sleep begins shortly after sundown. People eat dinner at twilight, say their prayers, and slip into bed soon after. No binge watching, no midnight snacks. Just immediate exhaustion from a long day of labour, or prayer, or politicking. So when you fall asleep early, say around 8 p.m, you naturally wake up again a few hours later in the deepest part of night. This in-between period, it's called the watch. You don't jump out of bed. No, you lay there blinking, mind humming. You're calm, thoughtful. This is normal. Everyone does it. It's the time for reflection dreams, maybe even a little mischief. People use this time for all sorts of things. Some pray. A lot of people pray, quietly murmuring in bed, counting beads or whispering the psalms. Others get up, stir the fire, sip a bit of warm ale or check on animals. You might wander outside, listen to the night birds, or, if you're lucky, enjoy a quiet moment with someone special. Yes, segmented sleep had some perks. It wasn't just about biology, though. Modern researchers say our circadian rhythms naturally lean toward this two-sleep system when artificial light isn't involved. It was also practical. In a world where days were dictated by sunlight, sleep patterns bent around it. In winter nights, stretched long, too long to sleep straight through. So instead of fighting insomnia, medieval people worked it into their lives. And here you are now laying on your prickly straw sack, listening to the hearth pop, your breath visible in the chill. You've had your first sleep, and now your brain is alert in that curious middle time. You reach for the fire and toss on another log. The embers respond with a soft hiss, casting flickering shadows across the beams. Sometimes you talk to others during this period. Not loud conversation, more of a hushed whisper. People shared stories, or planned, or worried. Imagine a couple lying side by side whispering about planting crops, that weird dream from last week, or whether the miller is truly cursed. Intimacy often happened now, quiet in the dark, while the world outside lay still. And yes, this was often the time for marital matters. One medieval medical text even recommends this post-first sleep window as the ideal moment for conceiving a child. Apparently, you're most relaxed and clear-headed. Then who knew? Historians still argue whether this segmented pattern was universal or mostly for the rural and religious. City life might have nudged people into different rhythms, especially those working odd hours. But in general, across Europe, the evidence is clear. 2 sleeps were the norm. Monastic records, peasant diaries, even medical and religious texts everyone knew about first sleep and second sleep. It wasn't strange. It wasn't insomnia. It was expected. So what do you do in this in-between time? Maybe you get up and light a candle carefully, because tallow candles are messy and expensive, and knocking one over could mean a house fire. You warm some cider or milk. Maybe stir in a little valerian root or poppy extract, because herbs were everyone's sleep aid. Then you sit by the fire in your shift blanket wrapped around your shoulders, letting your thoughts wander. Maybe you take a quick stroll outside. You pull on your cloak step into wooden shoes and ease the door open. The stars overhead are clear and sharp, without modern light pollution. The night sky looks almost too bright. You stand under it and listen to the rustling trees, to a dog barking in the distance, to the wind whispering against thatch. And now you begin to feel it again. That tug, the return of drowsiness, the warm hum beneath your ribs that says time for second sleep. So you return to bed, blow out the candle and nestle back into that scratchy wool and crunchy straw. And somehow the mattress feels less cruel now. The air is warmer. You've softened into your space. Second sleep is deeper, heavier. The dreams are more vivid now, often longer and more intense. People believed this second sleep was when divine messages came. Visions, warnings, or blessings. Some believed the gap between first and second sleep let your spirit roam, soaking in truths the waking world couldn't handle. You dream now maybe of a vast field swaying with golden wheat, a blue-robed figure calling to you across it. Or perhaps a church bell tolling underwater. You can't move your legs. It's strange, but you don't fight it. Just drift. Elsewhere in the village, others are dreaming too. In their own straw beds or on shared mattresses, curled around clay jugs of warm stones or cradled beside their children. Some whisper in their sleep. Some snore. A few talk loud enough to wake the rooster. Eventually the light begins to creep in. Not all at once, just a silver smudge on the horizon. Second sleep lifts gradually like fog. You stir again. This time not from some divine dream or midnight moment, but because the birds have started. And the cow is moaning. And someone outside just dropped a bucket. You rise slowly, bones popping. The coals have gone cold. The air stings your face. But you've done it. Survived another medieval night. Not in one neat stretch like a modern 8-hour Netflix-powered coma, but in 2 purposeful acts, broken by a midnight intermission of thought prayer and possibly snack time. And somehow, it worked. Segmented sleep might feel alien now, but once it was your body's rhythm, your soul's cycle. You didn't fight it, you leaned into it. In the dark between sleeps, you found moments of peace. So now in this strange morning hush, you begin your daily routine, feeding chickens, stretching hay, maybe heading to mass or out to the fields. But inside you, there's something different, something ancient, because you didn't just sleep. You remembered how to rest. You rise before the sun. Not by choice, of course, it's just what life demands. The rooster is only part way through his first complaint of the day, but already there's movement in the house. Someone shuffles by with a slop bucket. You hear the thunk of firewood being dropped into the hearth, and the quiet rustle of wool garments being thrown on in a hurry. The room is dim but alive. Your second sleep is over, and now it's time to pretend you're rested. You stretch slowly. Every joint pops. Sleeping on straw doesn't do your spine any favors. You slept in your clothes, so dressing is minimal, just a belt, a cloak, maybe shoes if you're heading out. If you're a peasant, you might dunk your head in a barrel of water outside. If you're noble, there's a basin nearby filled by someone else. Either way, you splash icy water on your face and call it washing. Soap is a distant dream, and shampoo, forget it. Just tie your hair back and hope the lice are napping. Now the real fun begins trying to shake off the medieval sleep crust. Remember, there's no coffee. The first thing you reach for isn't a mug, but maybe a crust of old bread. Breakfast isn't a meal here, it's more like a legal technicality. Something to keep your stomach from growling during prayers. It's usually leftovers porridge if you're lucky, pottage if you're not, or maybe just beer. Yes, beer. It's safer than water. Even children drink it, though theirs is weak, more liquid bread than intoxicant. You sip the ale, it's warm, slightly sour, but your body doesn't argue. And now you start moving. Sleep hygiene as we know it today didn't really exist. People weren't fretting about REM cycles or melatonin levels. They just did what life let them do. But even so, there were rituals. Things you had to do before bed to make sure demons didn't crawl into your mouth while you slept, or worse. Charms, prayers, rituals, everyone had one. You might recite the Lord's Prayer exactly 7 times. Or place an iron knife under your pillow to keep away the fae. Maybe chalk a cross above your door, or hang a pouch of lavender, or in some cases dried animal parts above your bed. One particularly spooky practice involved smearing holy oil on the forehead to block out nightmares, or what they called night terrors sent by evil spirits. You might even say a few words to ward off the Alp, a demonic creature from German folklore that sits on your chest and steals your breath while you sleep. Sound familiar? That's sleep paralysis. Only now it's got a hat and possibly a grudge. Some people hung mirrors over their beds. Yes, even then, because they believed it would trap the soul before it wandered too far at night. Others tucked herbs into their mattresses. Wormwood, chamomile, St. John's wort. Smells that were supposed to soothe, or at least distract from the smell of mildew. But here's the weird part. Some of these practices were oddly scientific. Not scientifically correct, mind you, but based on observation. People knew that food affected their sleep. That wine before bed made for restless dreams. That moonlight could stir emotions, especially among the melancholic. Medieval medicine revolved around the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much black bile. That's insomnia, or depression, or both. So people tailored their evenings to their humoral balance. Cold and dry. Drink warm milk with honey. Hot and wet. Take a cool bath. Of course, baths were rare. Heating that much water was labour-intensive, and shared tubs weren't exactly hygienic. But if you were rich, a hot bath by candlelight, followed by a warm bed and perfumed linens, was the closest thing to a medieval spa day. Historians still argue whether these pre-bed rituals were more religious or medical. Some say they were pure superstition, others argue they were early psychology placebos perhaps, but powerful ones. Either way, people took them seriously. You didn't just collapse into bed, you prepared, because in the dark anything could happen. Let's talk about beds again, specifically who you share them with. You've probably imagined sleeping alone or with a partner. But in medieval times, that was a luxury. Most people shared beds with siblings, parents, or even strangers. In inns, you'd pay for a space in a bed, not a private room. You might be crammed in with a sweaty merchant, a chatty monk, and a man who insists on spooning whether you like it or not. This wasn't weird, it was economic. Beds were expensive. So was heat. So was space. So people doubled, tripled, or quadrupled up. Children slept with parents. Servants slept in the same room. Apprentices curled up beside their masters. Sometimes a whole family shared one mattress. Mom, dad, 6 kids, a baby, and the family dog if it was small. You learned not to move much, and don't even think about snoring. It also made sleep strangely social. You whispered stories, sang lullabies, asked questions you didn't dare say in daylight. In this pitch-black huddle, people bonded. And if someone had a nightmare, they weren't alone. That said, if someone had lice, you weren't alone either. Nightwear varied wildly. Peasants wore their day clothes. Nobles wore nightgowns, long loose shifts that could double as burial robes. Wealthy people sometimes wore nightcaps to keep their heads warm, because most body heat escapes there. You, of course, wear yours tilted slightly to the side for style. You check the fire before leaving the house. Let it die too early and you'll freeze. Let it smoulder too hot and you risk a chimney fire or worse, burning the thatch roof. Fire safety was primitive. Some folks covered coals with ash to keep them alive until morning. Others smothered the fire entirely, saying a prayer as they did. After all, sleep was a kind of death. And death in the Middle Ages came often. Sometimes in sleep, you finally step outside. The village is stirring. You nod to the neighbour hauling water. A child waves at you from the threshold of a house held together with more hope than timber. The morning air smells of smoke, dung, and dew. You feel tired still, not fully rested, but that's okay, because last night you did what they did. You braved the dark, shared the straw, watched the fire fade. You lay still and waited not for sleep to come, but for rest to find you. In this world, that's enough. You walk through the mud-packed path behind your hut, where chickens peck aimlessly, and the smell of manure battles the morning chill. The sun is rising slowly, pale and uncertain, like even it isn't ready to be awake. You rub your eyes, shoulders hunched, and try to will some energy into your bones. Another medieval day begins, but you're already thinking about the next time you get to sleep, which, let's be honest, is the most exciting part of your schedule. Not because sleep is restful, not because the mattress is soft. No, it's because going to sleep here is its own bizarre adventure, and you never quite know what's going to happen. Especially when you live in a time when dreams aren't just dreams. They're messages. Dreams were big business in the Middle Ages. Not the I forgot my pants at school kind, but epic, fire-breathing, angel-whispering dreams. Dreams were portals. To God, to demons, to your future. Sometimes all at once. Monks kept dream journals. Kings had personal dream interpreters. Even peasants learned to decode symbols. Snakes meant betrayal. Flying meant divine favor, teeth falling out. Probably death. Or maybe marriage. Historians still argue whether the interpretations came from folklore or religious texts, but everyone had an opinion, and the church. Oh, the church was very into dreams. If you dreamed of saints or visions of Mary, you might be considered blessed, or at least interesting enough to question. Dreaming about fire or falling or strange beasts that could mean sin. You might need confession or an exorcism. There's even a book, the Somniala Danielis, which is basically the medieval version of a dream dictionary. It breaks down common dreams and assigns meanings, because clearly a guidebook is exactly what you need when your brain throws a random goat into your subconscious for no reason. So you start paying attention. You keep a piece of wax tablet by the bed ready to scribble down your dreams before the fire embers go out. Last night you dreamed of drowning in barley porridge. Not ideal. You're hoping it's just stress. Sleep becomes a puzzle. You try to control your dreams. Some people claim they can steer them. One friar says sleeping on your right side encourages holy visions. Another swears eating eel before bed summons prophetic dreams. You try it. Now you're dreaming about a fish that taxes your grain. Not helpful. Others get more experimental. They start using dream pillows, tiny sachets filled with herbs like rosemary, rose petals, and hops. Some say these bring calming dreams. Others say they attract spirits. Either way, they smell better than your actual bedding. Night by night, you notice patterns. You dream more vividly after heavy meals. Wine makes your dreams fragmented and strange. And when you fall asleep anxious, your dreams twist like smoke, dark, tangled, full of teeth and whispers. You mention it to the village priest. He nods gravely and tells you to sleep with a crucifix under your pillow, just in case. You do. That night, you dream of a glowing doorway and your grandmother waving at you from the other side. She's knitting socks out of fog. Okay, sure, but not every dream is metaphorical. Sometimes it's just fear. You're not scared of the dark exactly. It's more what might be in the dark. Sleep was vulnerable in the Middle Ages. No locks. Thin walls, wolves, raiders, ghosts. Sometimes all three. You go to bed wondering if you'll wake up, or what you'll wake to. So people made rules. Don't fall asleep facing a window, that's how spirits get in. Don't whistle before bed, it calls the fae. Don't say your own name 3 times out loud after nightfall. Just don't. You tuck yourself in, whisper your protections, and try not to move too much. And yet, even with all the fear, people wanted to dream. They needed it. It was their only escape. For a few hours, they weren't serfs or monks or plague survivors. They were knights, angels, birds. They could fly, weep, be forgiven. Even criminals weren't immune. There are court records of thieves insisting they were innocent because a dream told them so. A white ox appeared and said, "I must return the stolen sheep." The judge was unimpressed. But you admire the commitment. Sometimes dreams were so vivid, people built their lives around them. One woman claimed she dreamed of a saint who told her to dig under an old tree. She did, and found a coin. Word spread. Others followed suit. The tree didn't survive the week. Dreams didn't just stay in sleep. They crept into waking life, into choices, into faith, into fears. If you dreamed of a relative, you might bring bread to the church for their soul. If you dreamed of a storm, you might delay planting. If you dreamed of a crow, well, better stay home. People lived by dreams, and sometimes died by them. Historians debate whether medieval people genuinely believed their dreams were real, or if it was more symbolic. But when you live in a world ruled by fate, faith, and the occasional leech-based medicine, dreams felt like the most logical part of the day. So you keep dreaming. Some nights you dream you're climbing an endless tower made of bread. Others you're back in your childhood home, but the walls are made of moss and your mother speaks in riddles. You don't always understand. That's okay, because dreams in this time aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be felt. You wake with the images still clinging to your skin. You lie there staring at the thatched ceiling, heart beating a little faster. Maybe it meant something, maybe not. But for a moment you weren't here. You were elsewhere. And somehow that's enough. You toss off the covers, scratchy warm, and always smelling slightly of smoke, and you sit up. You survived the night. Your soul presumably has returned to your body. And whatever strange messages your brain delivered while you slept, well, they'll have to wait. The goats aren't going to milk themselves. But tonight, you'll do it all again. You'll eat your simple dinner, say your charms, check the door 3 times for no real reason, and slide into bed with 3 other family members and a dog that insists on sleeping on your feet. You'll wait for first sleep, wake for the watch, and slide back into second sleep. And when the dreams come, you'll listen, because in this strange muddy candle-lit life, they might just be the only voice telling you more than you already know. You're deep into second sleep now, and the room is as still as it ever gets. A gentle creak of the beams above. The occasional shift of a sibling pulling at the blanket. And your own breath soft and rhythmic. You might think this is the calmest part of the night, but really, this is when things get weird. Because tonight you're dreaming with a fever, not a metaphorical one. A literal full-body sweaty, unsettling medieval fever. Your limbs feel heavy in the dream. There's a buzzing behind your eyes. Your thoughts are soaked in something thick and confusing. And just outside your vision, something moves. Is it a demon, a priest, a goat wearing shoes? Hard to tell. Fever dreams are their own breed. You can thank poor sanitation, bad water, or that neighbour who sneezed in your barley stew. Germ theory doesn't exist yet, so no one's blaming bacteria. They're blaming air. Bad air. Miasma, they call it. Invisible, foul-smelling vapours rising from swamps' privies, or the breath of your less hygienic uncle. To protect against it, people wear amulets filled with herbs. They carry pomanders, scented balls of clove and ambergris to sniff when the air feels sickly. Windows are shut tight during epidemics. Fires are burned indoors to purify the space. You're basically being smoked like a ham while you sleep. And when you do get sick, sleep becomes both remedy and risk. Some medieval physicians recommend plenty of rest to balance the humours. Others say too much sleep weakens the body. One 14th century doctor even claimed that sleeping on your left side while ill invites death. Thanks for the tip, guy who probably died at 38. So you try to sleep, but sleep turns strange. You start dreaming things that don't follow any plot. Floating candles, talking pigs, an endless corridor filled with bread ovens. You wake in a sweat, not sure if you're alive or halfway to sainthood. Your family, if they're awake, might try a few home remedies. A poultice made from warm onions, a prayer to Saint Apollonia, or if you're really unlucky, bloodletting. Nothing says sweet dreams like someone sticking a knife in your arm before bed to drain the evil spirits. And yet through all this chaos, people cling to sleep. They need it. It's one of the few things they can control. When you're sick and the doctor's prescribed a boiled weasel or a compress made of moss, the only real hope you've got is closing your eyes and slipping into somewhere else. It's not just physical illness that brings fever dreams. Grief, fear, hunger. They all twist your nights. You remember an old woman down the lane who lost her son last winter. She stopped speaking. She just slept and wept and mumbled in her sleep. People said she was touched by spirits. You wonder if maybe she just didn't want to be awake anymore. Historians still debate whether people in the Middle Ages understood the connection between sleep and mental health. Some say they didn't have the framework. Others argue they did, just in different language. Melancholy, they called it. A sadness of the soul. It was caused by too much black bile, or maybe an imbalance of the moon. Whatever the diagnosis, people turned to sleep as a way to cope. They called it God's little death. And sometimes, honestly, it felt like relief. You lie back down. Fever dreams ebb and flow. You dream of wolves with priest collars, of a woman who speaks backwards, of fireflies the size of sheep. It's terrifying, but also kind of awesome. Like you've got a personal portal to a weird dimension no one else can see. And you're not alone. Writers, mystics, even kings have these dreams. Hildegard of Bingen, the famous abbess and mystic, described her visions as waking dreams, sacred experiences that came during long hours of rest and reflection. She wasn't accused of heresy, miraculously, probably because her visions involved enough Latin and incense to pass the vibe check, but others weren't so lucky. Some dreamers were labelled witches. If you said your dreams predicted storms or crop failure, you might get questioned. If you said you flew in your dreams, that was suspicious. Flying was for birds. And Satan. Still, the dreams persisted. You couldn't stop them. You couldn't always explain them. But they were yours. Raw, vivid, often disturbing, but deeply real. Sometimes you talk about them the next morning. Around the communal bread. I dreamed of a door made of teeth. Someone nods like that's completely normal. I dreamed I was chased by 3 bishops and a duck someone else offers. Another nod. This is your therapy. Your dream circle. No couches, no Freud, just a few tired people, and a bowl of stew that may or may not contain squirrel. Even kids aren't spared. They wake crying from night terrors, eyes wide, pointing to corners of the room no one wants to look at. Parents hush them, light a candle, whisper a prayer. It was just a dream, they say, but their eyes linger on the shadows, just a second too long. So you learn early that dreams are serious business. Maybe not always holy, maybe not always helpful, but serious. You listen to them. You watch for patterns. You remember that last year the miller's wife dreamed of weeping blackbirds 2 days before the river flooded. Coincidence maybe, but also, maybe not. You curl into your blanket and ride the last waves of fevered sleep. Your body aches, your mind wanders, but somehow it still feels like healing. Like the dream world knows what it's doing, even if you don't. Eventually the fever breaks. You wake clammy and confused. Someone left a bowl of broth by your bed. There's a little beetle floating in it, but you're too tired to care. You sip it anyway. The room tilts gently around you. You survived, for now. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but just to float, to drift. Because in this time in this life, sleep isn't just a necessity, it's a rebellion. A moment of quiet in a world that never quite lets you rest. And even in sickness, even in chaos that's worth savouring, you sigh and let go. The fever's gone, the dreams have retreated, the night wraps around you like a worn wool cloak. Scratchy, yes, but warm. You're still here. The first hint of dawn teases the edge of the horizon, but you're still horizontal, tucked into your shared bed that creaks like an old ship every time someone rolls over. You're not quite asleep anymore, but you're not quite awake either. This is that dreamy, in-between state, hazy and strange. And right now, your biggest concern is one you never imagined before: sleep demons. Yes, demons. Actual ones. With claws, wings, sometimes hooves. The kind that, according to medieval folks, slink in through keyholes, perch on your chest, and make sleeping feel like drowning in hot tar. Sound dramatic. That's because it is. But that doesn't mean people didn't take it very seriously. You've probably heard of sleep paralysis. The sensation of being frozen in bed while your brain screams at your body to do something. Today we know it's a neurological glitch, a temporary blip between REM sleep and wakefulness. But back then, oh no, that was absolutely without question a demon sitting on your chest. The most famous of these nighttime visitors, the incubus and succubus. The incubus was a male demon who visited women. The succubus was female targeting men. What did they want? Let's just say it wasn't to borrow a cup of sugar. PG-13 details. Aside, the experiences were terrifying, and people believed them. Desperately, they would describe these visits in vivid detail, being pinned down, touched, choked, unable to scream. You feel like you're sinking into the mattress. Eyes wide open, breath stuck in your throat. Your body is stone, but your thoughts are fireworks. It's not just fear, it's the fear. Primeval, unnameable. And back then the only explanation was demon. The image of the incubus even shows up in paintings. One famous one from the 18th century, yes, a bit later than our main timeline. But it draws on older beliefs, shows a grotesque creature squatting on a woman's chest, while a creepy horse face peeks through the curtains. Because clearly, what your nightmares needed was more horse. And this belief wasn't fringe. Clergy wrote about it. Doctors tried to explain it. And regular people lived in fear of going to bed alone. Or worse, waking up alone after one of those episodes and wondering what had just happened. Some slept with crosses around their necks. Others sprinkled salt around the bed. Some even slept in groups not for warmth, but for protection. Historians still argue whether these demon tales were metaphorical expressions of trauma or literal beliefs held by terrified villagers. The answer might be both. After all, when your world is filled with mystery, it's easier to see demons in the dark than admit your brain is glitching like a broken cogwheel. Of course, demons weren't the only things haunting the night. There were also night hags. Not demons exactly, but witch-like figures said to ride you while you slept. Yes, ride. You'd wake with bruises, scratches, or a general sense that something awful had happened in the dark. Nightmares weren't just bad dreams. They were attacks. Spiritual ambushes. The word nightmare itself originally referred to this. Mare came from Old English mare, a kind of malicious spirit. So you weren't just dreaming of scary things. You were being visited by one. In some places, people would hang iron scissors near their beds to ward off night hags. In others, they'd place Bibles under pillows or write sacred words on door frames. And some people just didn't sleep lying flat. Too vulnerable. They'd prop themselves up, sleep sitting, like snoozing in a carriage, uncomfortable but demon-resistant. And let's talk about the demon breath. People said that if a person died in their sleep, it was because a demon had breathed into their mouth, stealing their soul. So if someone passed away quietly in bed, The assumption wasn't peaceful rest, it was a spiritual mugging. You start to understand why sleep, for all its allure, came with a long list of anxieties. But here's the thing, people didn't just fear demons. They tried to outwit them. You'd hear of cunning women who sold demon-repellent charms, amulets made from wolf's teeth, tiny bags of crushed sage and lavender, a strand of dried garlic braided with a feather from a black hen. Was it weird? Absolutely. Did it work? Who knows? But if it helped you sleep, who's complaining? Then there were prayers. Long, elaborate invocations said before bed, asking for protection from all evil spirits, phantoms, and unclean visitors. One monk reportedly recited 150 psalms each night before lying down. That's either dedication or severe anxiety, maybe both. Some monasteries even had specific sleep angels they called upon. Yes, angels, the heavenly bouncers. If a demon tried anything shady, the angels would in theory show up and handle it. A sort of divine security system. Heavenly hotline. Press 1 for Michael, 2 for Gabriel. Of course not all visitors in the night were evil. People also believed in dream guides. Benevolent spirits who came with messages. You'd know the difference by how you felt when you woke. Light, calm, maybe even inspired. Probably a friendly ghost. Gasping, sweaty, half convinced you swallowed a candle, that'd be the incubus again. And yet no matter how terrifying the nights got, people kept sleeping. They had to. There was work to do in the morning, animals, to feed lives to continue living. You learn to coexist with the fear, like a roommate you don't like but can't evict. Sometimes you'd even try to fight back. One story tells of a blacksmith who claimed to have punched a demon mid-nightmare. He woke with a bruised fist and a broken wall panel. Whether he actually hit a demon or just his bedpost is unclear, but the legend stuck. And the moral punch first, ask questions later. Ask, you've had nights like that. Waking in the dark, heart racing, feeling like something is just beyond the curtain. Maybe it's a draft. Maybe it's a mouse. Maybe it's an ancient evil. You light a candle and check. Nothing. But the air still feels heavy. So you lie back down. You mumble your usual words, half prayer, half plea, and pull the covers up to your chin. One hand rests near the iron scissors tucked under your straw mattress, just in case. And eventually, sleep returns. It always does. Not because the fear is gone, but because your body can't keep holding it. You give in. You float. You go back to that place where even the worst dreams can't quite catch you, where your mind folds in on itself like a quiet origami of survival. The fire's almost out now. Just a few embers left, glowing like watchful eyes in the hearth. The dog shifts at your feet. Your sibling snores gently. You're safe for now. And the demon, if it shows up tonight, it better be ready for a fight. You wake not to birdsong or bells, but to a sharp poke in the ribs. Your sibling wants your spot near the fire, and they're not above a little tactical elbowing to get it. You groan, turn, and pull the blanket tighter. The floor is cold, and so is the air. Dawn's barely stretched its fingers over the hills, and already your day is being negotiated like a medieval chess match. But let's stay in bed a little longer, because this section of your strange, sleepless life comes with a twist. No demons this time. No fever-drenched visions. Just a good old-fashioned problem, where do you actually sleep? Because for a lot of medieval folks, maybe even you-bed is a communal concept. You don't have a private room. You might not even have your own blanket. The concept of personal space hasn't quite entered the chat yet. You sleep with your family, your siblings, sometimes extended relatives. If you're a servant, you bunk down with other servants, or if you're lucky, near the fire in the kitchen. If you're a guest, you share a bed with someone else. Yes, even strangers. It's not weird. It's expected. Beds are expensive, space is limited, and body heat is efficient. Think of it like medieval Airbnb, but without any privacy settings. Shared twin with 4 others and a goat 3.5 stars. This arrangement leads to some fascinating dynamics. Imagine trying to fall asleep while 3 people are snoring beside you, 1 is whispering their prayers, and another is stealing your half of the blanket. And remember, no earplugs, no white noise machines. Just the raw, unfiltered sounds of humanity. Of course, there's always that one person who talks in their sleep. You've heard them. They mumble like they're at a tavern in their dreams, arguing over ale prices or reciting the Lord's Prayer backward. It's unnerving. But also, let's be honest, kind of entertaining. Then there's the issue of who sleeps where. That's often based on hierarchy. Parents in the middle, kids at the edges. In noble households, the lord and lady get the grand bed, often raised on a platform, with drapes less for glamour, more for warmth, and a little illusion of privacy. The servants, they're on pallets nearby, or tucked under tables, or just curled up on rush-covered floors. And in monasteries, rows of narrow beds or wooden benches. Monks sleeping side by side in long dormitories called dormitoria. The name sounds fancy, but the reality is closer to a sleepover in a stone refrigerator. Silence is enforced. Farts are not. Historians still argue whether this constant bed sharing was a source of comfort or stress. On the one hand, you've got company. On the other hand, someone always kicks in their sleep. One scholar suggests that communal sleeping forged stronger social bonds. Another counters that it probably just led to stronger resentment and more midnight elbow jabs. Still, not everyone had a bed at all. The poorest folks they made do with straw-stuffed sacks, if that. Some slept directly on the floor. In warmer months, outside wasn't unheard of, especially during festivals or while traveling. Traveling musicians, peddlers and pilgrims often found shelter in barns, sharing space with animals and hoping no one rolled over into a chicken. And the animals. Yeah, they weren't always outside. In cottages, animals often shared sleeping space with people, either for warmth or because there simply wasn't another option. A pig makes a surprisingly decent foot warmer. A chicken does not. One quirky detail, some inns rented beds not by the night but by the portion. Half a bed, a third, even a narrow sleep spot for one. You might find yourself wedged between a bearded baker and a toothless friar, all of you trying to pretend this isn't the weirdest slumber party ever. And if you're a woman, sleeping arrangements can be even more complex. Young maidens might share beds with older female relatives or household chaperones. In some noble homes, ladies slept with their maids nearby, not just for assistance, but for propriety. Sleeping alone, that raised eyebrows. What were you trying to hide? In contrast, married couples were expected to share a bed, even if their relationship had all the warmth of a frozen cod. Bed sharing was part of the marital contract. Sleep reproduction and general cohabitation were a package deal. But here's something amusing couples often had to work around their housemates when it came to intimacy. Privacy was rare. So you'd wait until the kids were asleep, or pretend to need to check on the goats, or more realistically just live with the fact that someone in the next bed was very pointedly facing the wall. There's also the matter of sleep customs. For instance, some people slept sitting up, not by choice but by design. The belief was that lying flat encouraged death or worse illness. Upright sleeping was considered healthier, so they propped themselves with pillows or even special angled beds, a medieval recliner, if you will. And then there were nightcaps. Not the drink though, sure that too. We're talking literal caps. People wore cloth hats to bed to retain heat, and sometimes full nightshirts that reached their ankles. Looking like a ghost was just part of staying cozy. Dreamy little detail children were sometimes sung to sleep with lullabies that mixed sweet melodies with low-key horrifying warnings. Sleep or the fox will get you. Close your eyes or the witch will see. Sweet dreams, little Timmy. Don't let the existential dread bite. One fringe but fantastic tidbit: in some Scandinavian traditions, folks believed that sleeping with an iron knife under your pillow kept trolls away. Not sure how effective it was, but it probably helped with overly curious bedmates too. Despite all the oddities, bed sharing wasn't always bad. On long winter nights when the wind howled through the cracks and snow piled outside the door, there was comfort in company. A shared body heat pact. A mutual understanding that yes, feet will touch, and no, we will never speak of it. You lying there now are wrapped in a patchwork of woven habits and unspoken rules. The straw beneath you rustles. The blanket smells faintly of sheep. Someone snores. Someone coughs. You shift a little closer to the warmest body you can find, and they don't even stir. This is sleep medieval style. Not silent, not solitary, but shared. Not a sanctuary, but a shelter. And as your eyes drift closed again, you realize maybe that's enough. You stir again, not from the noise around you this time, but from your own internal clock, or what passes for one in the Middle Ages. You'd expect to sleep straight through till morning right wrong. Because tonight, like every other night, you'll wake up for your first sleep intermission. Yes, you read that right. Medieval people didn't sleep in one uninterrupted block. Instead, they followed a pattern called segmented sleep. 2 separate chunks of slumber with a period of wakefulness in between. And honestly, once you get used to it, it's not the worst idea. Your first sleep begins shortly after sundown. Depending on the season and your lifestyle, that could be as early as 7 or 8 p.m. You sleep deeply for a few hours. This is your first sleep, or primo somno if you're feeling fancy. Then sometime around midnight, your eyes open naturally. No rooster, no bells, just awake. And here's the thing, it's not a problem. It's expected. People don't panic about waking up at night because that's just how sleep works in this world. Historians still argue whether this was biologically driven or culturally reinforced. Some believe it's our natural rhythm suppressed only recently by artificial light and 9-to-5 expectations. Others think it was shaped by necessity timed to coincide with watch shifts, prayer cycles, and household chores. Either way, for medieval you, it's normal. So what do you do during this in-between time turns out quite a bit. You might tend to small tasks, mend a tear in your tunic, stoke the hearth, or check that no one's stolen your best chicken again. If you're religious, you say your midnight prayers. Monks and nuns. They're already in full swing with matins the first prayer service of the day. Imagine chanting psalms at 2 a.m. in a freezing chapel. Your voice echoes through stone like smoke through trees. But if you're just a regular villager, your waking hour is quieter, reflective, intimate. Some people read. Well, those who could read. Books are rare, but if you're educated or noble, you might have a religious text, or even a book of hours tucked under your pillow. Candlelight flickers. Pages rustle. Time moves slowly. Others just talk. Husbands and wives whisper beneath the covers. Parents stroke their children's hair. Siblings swap stories or grumble about who kicked whom. It's a quiet social time, a liminal hour between dreams and dawn. And yes, sometimes this interlude is for intimacy. In fact, medieval doctors often recommended it. The body's relaxed, the mind is clear, the embers are still warm. Cue the medieval mood lighting. This wasn't just romance, it was medical advice. Then there are the dreamers. Some people wake from their first sleep full of strange visions. They use this time to reflect, interpret, or even write them down. If you had a weird dream about a red fish riding a goat through a field of skulls, now's the time to ask what it means. You won't get an answer, but still better than counting sheep. On fringe practice midnight visits. In some communities, people use this time to sneak out, visit neighbors, deliver messages, even engage in a little unsanctioned romance. Think of it like medieval DMs, but colder and with more mud. Some even use the break to visit public bathhouses, especially in towns where the bath stayed warm overnight. Can you imagine? It's pitch black, you're wrapped in a cloak, and you shuffle down to soak in steaming water with a few half-asleep neighbors. All of you nodding in drowsy solidarity like, yep, it's 1:45 a.m., and I too needed to de-flea myself. The concept of segmented sleep shows up in writings from all over. Chaucer mentions it. So does Thomas Aquinas. Even court documents from the 13th century talk about things happening after first sleep, as if it's a perfectly normal time to be up and about, which of course it was. Eventually, your body signals it's time to sleep again. You snuff the candle. You shift beneath the blanket. The room is quieter now. Even the fire's gone to sleep. And so begins your second sleep, often shorter and lighter than the first. This one carries you toward dawn. It's dreamier, a little fuzzier around the edges. Your mind drifts through half-thoughts and soft images, unfinished stories, unresolved arguments, maybe that fish goat again. When people woke for good after second sleep, they usually did so naturally. No alarms, no iPhone pings, no rise and grind nonsense. You woke when the light said it was time, or when the cow did. And this dual sleep pattern wasn't exclusive to Europe. There are reports of segmented sleep in Africa, the Middle East, even some indigenous American tribes. It seems like left to our own devices, and without 24/7 light, we naturally drift into this rhythm. So why don't we sleep this way anymore? Well, blame the Industrial Revolution. With artificial light and strict work schedules, people started compressing sleep into one block. 8 hours give or take. Midnight wakings became a problem to fix, not a feature to enjoy. Sleep pills replaced prayers. Scrolling replaced candlelit chats. Historians still argue whether this shift was a loss or an improvement. Sure, consolidated sleep is efficient, but maybe it stole something quiet and soft from us, those weird little hours when the world paused and let you just exist. You lying there now are starting to feel drowsy again. The first sleep warmed your bones. The midnight interlude passed like fog. Your eyes flutter. The weight of sleep presses in again, gentle but firm. Someone coughs. A log shifts in the fire. And once more you surrender, back into the second sleep, back into the waiting dark. You wake again, but this time the light is different. It's blue and pale, filtering through the wooden slats, or the oiled parchment window, like water through linen. Your second sleep is over, and the day is beginning whether you asked for it or not. But here's a detail you might not have expected. You're groggy, sure, but not because of a bad mattress or a late-night scroll through your medieval Twitter feed. No, this morning haze is thanks to the air in your house, which smells slightly of smoke, stale breath, and damp wool. The fire's long gone out and the cold is creeping back into your toes. Still, you're lucky. You got a night's rest interrupted, sure, but at least under a roof. Many don't. The idea of a calm, private night of sleep is more luxury than norm in your time. Let's talk about how that air really feels. Because this section is about something that doesn't always get the credit it deserves, the sights, sounds, and smells of the medieval sleep environment. You're about to discover why sleep hygiene in the 14th century was a bit earthy. Let's start with smell. Your bedroom, or more likely the main room of your cottage, is packed with more than just people. You might have a dog curled up at your feet, a chicken pecking around the hearth, or even a pig dozing in the corner. The straw on the floor is fresh, meaning it's only mildly musty. There's no Febreze, just some crushed herbs scattered underfoot, maybe lavender, rosemary, or wormwood if you're feeling fancy. If you're lucky enough to be nobility, you sleep in a 4-poster bed with thick curtains not for decoration, but to trap heat. It also traps smell. Layers of perfume and wood smoke and human breath marinate together in what you could kindly call period fragrance. And let's not forget your bed linen's washed maybe once a season if you're upper class, less often if you're not. Sheets were expensive. Soap even more so. So that faint sour note you smell when you lift the blanket, that's just the past 3 weeks. You get used to it. Sound is another matter entirely. There's no such thing as a truly quiet medieval night. Even in the countryside, you've got howling wind, creaking timber, hooting owls, and the occasional scream, human or otherwise. You don't investigate. You just pull the blanket over your head and pretend you didn't hear it. In town, things are worse. Cats fight on the rooftops. Stray dogs bark. People stagger home from alehouses shouting riddles or slurred prayers. And don't forget the night soil men, those poor souls emptying chamber pots into the streets just before dawn. They do their work with noisy buckets and even noisier complaints. If you live near a monastery, you might hear the early morning bells summoning monks to lords. Beautiful if you're visiting. Brutal if you're trying to sleep in. It's not like you can hit snooze on a church tower. Now let's talk light. There's very little of it. Unless you're rich enough for beeswax candles, which are pricey and usually reserved for church or royal dinners, you're using tallow candles or rushlights. Rushlights are basically dried reeds dipped in animal fat. They burn, unevenly, smell a bit like bacon, and don't exactly scream ambience. Moonlight and firelight are your best friends, but firelight comes with risk. Open flames and dry thatched roofs are not a great combo. People sometimes fall asleep with the hearth still burning, only to wake up to smoke and panic. That's why some folks build bed chests. Sleeping boxes made of wood, almost like little sleeping coffins. Cozy right. You climb in, shut the door, and keep the heat in and the fire out. Think of it as an early form of a space heater combined with mild claustrophobia. Let's not forget vermin. Fleas, lice, and bed bugs are your nighttime companions. Everyone has them, even the queen. You might dust your bed with ashes or herbs to keep them at bay, but it's a losing battle. You scratch, you mutter, you go back to sleep. One truly bizarre fringe practice. In some regions, people would hang dead moles in their rooms to ward off night terrors and pests. Historians still argue whether this was based on actual superstition or just a cruel joke played on gullible relatives. There's also the matter of furniture, or the lack thereof. In most peasant homes, you sleep on a straw mattress or a pile of rags. If you're noble, you get a wooden frame, a stuffed mattress, feather pillows, and maybe even some bed curtains. But even then, comfort is a spectrum. No springs, no memory foam, just gravity wood and hope. If you're a traveller, your options are worse. Inns are crowded, smelly, and expensive. You might find yourself in a shared bed, or worse, a shared room with snoring strangers and a persistent draft. The term bedbug feels very literal here, and yet somehow people sleep. They adapt. Your body adjusts to the rhythm, the smells, the discomfort. Sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. You can't stay up watching medieval Netflix. You can't doom scroll your way into insomnia. You go to bed when it's dark. You wake when it's light. The rest is just surviving the in-between. And the people who really have it bad, the night watchmen. They patrol town walls or noble estates, calling the hours to signal they're still alive and that the town isn't burning down. Imagine hearing a voice at 3 a.m. calling 3 o'clock and all is well, and thinking, well, it wasn't, until you yelled, Let's not forget dreams. They were thought to be messages, sometimes divine, sometimes demonic, always taken seriously. If you dreamed of teeth falling out, you might expect a death in the family. If you dreamed of flying, you might be accused of witchcraft. No pressure. Just don't talk too loudly about it at breakfast. You stir now, fully awake. Your nose itches probably from the straw. Your mouth is dry. Someone nearby is already up shuffling across the floor. The cold kisses your skin the moment you lift the blanket. Outside, a rooster announces that, yes, it's that time again. You sit up, rub your eyes, stretch, and you realize the night has passed imperfect, noisy, smelly, and scratchy, but still somehow restorative. That in itself is a kind of miracle. The blanket falls from your shoulders as you stand reluctantly, slowly, and with the kind of ache that comes from a night spent half curled on straw. Your back cracks, your knees creak, and your feet seek the floor like they're not quite sure it's still there. Congratulations, it's morning in the Middle Ages, and you, my friend, are overdue for a very weird stretch. But here's the twist: before you can think about breaking fast or finding shoes, there's one more step in your nightly ritual morning cleansing, if you can even call it that. This section is all about how you wake up your body in a world with no toothpaste, no deodorant, no espresso, and a bathroom that is, well, let's just say outside adjacent. We're diving deep into medieval morning habits, from face splashing to foot washing, and one particularly curious case of onion armpit rubs. Let's start at your water source. You grab a wooden bucket and shuffle to the communal well, or if you're lucky, there's a cistern nearby. The water is cold, like mountain spring filtered through regret cold. There's no hot tap, no gentle mist setting, just ice kiss splash to the face, strong enough to make you gasp and wish you were back in bed. You bend over a basin or a trough, Pour a bit into your hands and rinse your face, maybe your arms. If you're truly dedicated, your feet. The air bites at your skin. There's no mirror, of course, so your reflection is whatever you can catch in the water's surface, blurred and shivering like a ghost version of yourself. The wealthy naturally have fancier options. They might have a pitcher and ewer set brought to their bedside by a servant. Picture it: gold-trimmed, ceramic-embroidered towels and a basin large enough to drown a medium-sized squirrel. Clean hands, clean face, and the illusion of freshness. But let's not kid ourselves. You're not bathing. You're not even scrubbing. You're just doing enough to feel human, or at least human adjacent. Now let's talk teeth. In theory, you should brush them. In practice, most people don't knot the way we think of it. Instead, some chew on twigs or rub their teeth with cloth. Others use crushed herbs or charcoal to freshen their breath. And some of the more fashion-conscious elite use powdered coral or ground bone. Sounds fancy, right? Except the coral can erode enamel and the bone. Well, it's bone. Medieval dentistry was less about prevention and more about endurance. If your tooth hurts, you wait. If it rots, you yank. If it falls out, congratulations, you're halfway to wisdom. Fringe remedy. Some people rubbed their gums with salt or honey, believing it kept them pink and firm. And yes, there were those who swore by morning gargles of vinegar. That'll wake you up quicker than coffee ever could. Speaking of smells, body odor was a constant companion. Deodorant as we know it didn't exist. But that didn't stop people from getting creative. There were recipes involving crushed mint rosewater and even crushed pearls suspended in vinegar. Fancy. Impractical. Absolutely ineffective. And then there's the onion trick. In some rural areas, it was believed that rubbing sliced onion or garlic under the arms warded off illness and kept demons at bay. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine health belief or just a very low-effort way to get personal space. Underwear maybe, if you're wealthy. If you're not well, let's just say your linen tunic does double duty. You might change your shift every few days, but there's no drawer full of cotton briefs, no laundry day. Just air it out, shake off the fleas and get on with it. And yes, morning bathroom routines were even more rustic. For the nobility, there might be a garderobe, a hole in a stone seat suspended over a pit or flowing water. For the average villager, you squat over a ditch, or a bucket, or if you're really classy, a chamber pot that gets tossed out into the alley after a sloshy morning walk. Gardez low, someone might shout, "Watch out for the water," which is your only warning before a cascade of last night's dinner hits the cobblestones below. Let that image settle as you reach for a crust of bread and pretend it's not soaked in the aroma of medieval hygiene. Now, the monastic wake-up is its own beast. Monks rise before dawn, summoned by bells that clang through the cold morning like judgment itself. They file silently to the cloister for lauds the early prayer. No talking, no food, no warm robes. Just you, your sandals, and the echo of your chanting brothers. They rinse their hands in the cloister fountain. Not for cleanliness, well, partly, but for ritual purity. The water's cold. The air's colder. But the discipline is the point. And then there's cosmetics, believe it or not. Medieval women, and some men, applied powdered lead for a pale complexion, rosewater for scent and soot for eyeliner. Yes, even at dawn. Pale skin meant wealth. It said, "I don't work in the sun, thank you very much." Of course, applying toxic metal to your cheeks each morning wasn't exactly a recipe for longevity, but priorities. One particularly odd beauty regimen. Some women whitened their teeth using urine. Human animal doesn't matter. It was considered sterile, and it definitely did something. Whether that something was bleaching or burning, we may never know, and you probably don't want to. After your cleanup, you begin to dress. Layer by layer, linen chemise or shirt woolen tunic, maybe hose or leggings if it's cold. If you're noble, you lace up sleeves, fasten buttons and tie intricate belts. If you're poor, you just throw your cloak over yesterday's clothes and mutter something about practicality. Shoes are stiff leather wooden soles or nothing at all. Bare feet are common. They toughen up over time, calloused, cracked, and indifferent to gravel. And finally, there's breakfast, which in some circles is frowned upon. Some believed eating too early in the day was a sign of gluttony. Monks waited until midday. Nobles picked at fruit or broth. But if you're a farmer, you grab what you can, bread ale, maybe some cheese, and head out. You've got fields to plough, animals to feed, and no time to fuss over avocado toast. You wipe your hands on your tunic, sling your bag over your shoulder, and step into the grey light of morning. Your sleep was fragmented, your hygiene was questionable, your feet are still cold. But you're awake, you're ready, and in this world, that's more than enough. You step outside, and for a moment the morning air feels almost hopeful, fresh. Damp grass, chimney smoke, distant clatter from carts already rumbling down rutted roads. The day has begun, and in the Middle Ages that means one thing: work waits for no one, and neither does your mattress, which is already being repurposed by the dog. But before you get busy with ploughing fields, weaving wool, or hauling barrels, there's a question you may not have considered. Where exactly do you sleep when you're not at home? Because let's face it, life back then wasn't stationary. Whether you're a merchant, a pilgrim, a soldier, or just someone trying to outrun a bad debt and a worse cousin, medieval travel was surprisingly common. So where do all these wandering souls sleep on the road? Strap in today, we're touring the medieval version of hotels, hostels, and the occasional hay bale behind a tavern. And trust me, you're going to miss your flea-ridden bed after this. First up, the inn. Sounds cozy, right? Wooden sign, warm fire bowl of stew. Well, sort of. Inns in medieval times varied wildly from somewhat pleasant coaching houses for the rich to dark, smoky taverns where the sheets have seen more bath than bleach. You walk in, and the smell hits first ale unwashed travellers and something vaguely goatish. If you're lucky enough to afford a private room, congrats, you get 4 walls and a door that sometimes latches. If not, you're in the common room. And yes, that means shared beds. You might be spooning with a stranger from Flanders and a shepherd from Kent, all snoring, farting, and dreaming of roast duck. Beds are rented by the space, not by the person. If it fits 3 bodies across, it gets 3 customers. Doesn't matter if you know each other. Doesn't matter if someone coughs all night and mumbles in Latin. You're stuck. For added excitement, your mattress might be a sack of straw on the floor. Or worse, a pallet in the corner next to the chamber pot. Noise levels vary from rowdy bard performance to couple in the next room practicing population growth. If you're sleeping in a city, things get even weirder. London, Paris, Bruges. These bustling medieval metropolises had hostels for travellers, but they were mostly run by guilds or religious groups. Pilgrims on the road to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela often stayed in pilgrim hospices, which offered food, a place to sleep, and bonus, a sermon about your sins. That's right, your stay often came with a side of repentance. Now let's say you don't have money, or you lost your purse to a pickpocket, or you're just really into the idea of extreme camping before it was cool. You might find yourself sleeping in a barn. No, not your barn. Someone else's. Which means you wait until it's dark, crawl inside quietly, and hope the cows don't snitch. You curl up in the hay, try not to think about mice, and let the warm scent of manure lull you to sleep. Honestly, not the worst night's rest. Warm quiet and cows make excellent snore buddies. In the warmer months, some people just sleep outdoors. Under a tree, by a river, inside a hollowed-out cart. There are stories of travellers bedding down beneath hedgerows with nothing but a cloak and some questionable life choices for warmth. Now this isn't without danger. There are robbers, of course, especially on the roads between towns. But also wolves, boars, and angry farmers who don't appreciate random strangers napping on their property. One fringe survival tactic. People tied small bells to their cloaks to scare off animals in the night. Historians still debate whether this was effective or just made them easier targets for thieves. If you're a soldier, your nights are even grimmer. You bed down in armour or half of it. Chainmail doesn't cuddle well, so you strip what you can curl up near the campfire and use your sword as a pillow. Literally, It's the best theft deterrent available. You're muddy exhausted, and if it rains well, you just roll under your shield and hope you don't drown in a puddle. Luxury is relative. Let's say you're noble and traveling. Good news. You don't sleep in inns, you sleep in castles, monasteries, or with fellow noble hosts. But even then, you might bring your own traveling bed, a kind of collapsible padded cot, often carried by servants. Pillows stuffed with goose-down sheets of fine linen and curtains for privacy. It's not a bad life if you ignore the fact that half your bedroom is also the storage room for someone else's turnip harvest. Here's a delightfully odd practice bed sharing as hospitality. In some regions, it's perfectly polite to offer a guest your bed and stay in it with them. Totally platonic. Probably. This was especially common in places with limited space, and often came with a set of rules you face away. Keep your hands to yourself and don't hog the blanket. Still, the awkward silence between two strangers trying not to snore directly into each other's faces is something modern hotels just can't offer. And we haven't even gotten to ships. If you're crossing a channel or heading up a river, your sleeping options are minimal. Below deck among the rats, with nothing but your boots for a pillow and the sound of sloshing water and creaking timber. Nausea cold, and sailors singing questionable ballads about mermaids. This is your lullaby now. Curiously, one of the most consistent places to find rest was monasteries. Monks were required to offer shelter to travellers, especially other clergy. Accommodations were simple: a wooden bed, a scratchy blanket, and the faint smell of boiled turnips. But peaceful, reverent, and for the first time in days quiet. Well, except for the bells. Still, after sleeping beside livestock on a pub floor, or under the stars with an acorn digging into your hip, the austere silence of a monastery dormitory starts to feel downright luxurious. So what have we learned? In medieval life, sleep isn't about comfort. It's about availability. You sleep where you can, when you can, sometimes with strangers, sometimes with vermin, sometimes with a prayer that you'll still have your boots come morning. But no matter where you lay your head, the rhythm of the night continues. The stars turn, the moon rises, and the world in all its muddy, noisy, aching glory spins quietly on. So the next time your hotel room doesn't have blackout curtains, just remember at least no one's spooning you uninvited while chickens cluck from the rafters. You're snoring loudly, rhythmically, possibly with a whimper on the exhale. But the real problem, so is everyone else. Because if you think medieval folks were shy sleepers, you're about to get a rude awakening, quite literally. Welcome to the not-so-quiet world of night sounds in the Middle Ages, where the darkness isn't silent and sleep is more of a negotiation than a guarantee. Let's start with the basics. You're lying on your lumpy straw mattress, or maybe on the wooden floor if you're low on luck and all seems well. The fire has died to embers, the room is dark, and your limbs ache in that satisfying, I lifted 47 buckets today kind of way. You're just about to drift off when snore. Not yours. Not even your spouse's. It's Uncle Hubert passed out across the room and growling like a dying boar with a horn stuck in its throat. His snores shake the rafters, literally. The dog gets up and leaves in protest. A nearby mouse rolls its eyes. In the Middle Ages, shared sleeping spaces weren't just common, they were the norm. Extended families slept together. Servants slept near their masters. Sometimes apprentices curled up in corners of shops. And in rural cottages, the livestock might be 2 feet away. That's not a metaphor. The cow actually is next to the bed, which means you're never sleeping alone, ever. Let's do a little audio tour of a medieval night. First, you have the snoring, of course. The variety is astonishing. Deep baritone snores, tiny wheezy ones, occasional surprise honks. Scholars joke that some medieval longhouses probably sounded like an unrehearsed orchestra of congested tubas. Then there's the rustling. People shifting in sleep, scratching, adjusting their blankets and muttering things like, "Did you take the goat cheese again?" in their dreams. Children cry out. Old folks groan in their sleep. Someone talks to a dead aunt named Mildred. You just deal with it. Add to that the wildlife soundtrack. Mice, rats, bats, sometimes snakes. They scurry through the thatch under your floorboards over your face, okay. Maybe not your face every night, but it's a possibility. Roosters don't wait until dawn. That's a myth. They crow at any hour, especially the one owned by your neighbor who feeds it fermented grain so it wakes up drunk and confused at 2:17 a.m. Dogs bark. Cats howl. Wolves sometimes yip in the distance. And if you're living near the woods, there might be boars snorting outside, rooting around the waste pit for snacks. Their grunts are strangely human in the dark. You roll over and clutch your blanket tighter. But one of the most underrated and truly medieval sleep disruptors, church bells. Every few hours, like clockwork, because clocks aren't widespread yet, bells toll for prayers. Monks rise for matins, and the village bell rings to let the angels know they're on schedule. Never mind that you were deep in a dream about owning 2 chickens and a turnip cart. The bell clangs, a dog barks, a baby wakes. The baby's mother groans. Someone trips over the hearth pot. You valiantly try to go back to sleep. And let's not forget the midnight visitors. No, not ghosts though, people back then absolutely believed in them. More on that soon. We're talking about the real interruptions, neighbours knocking on your door because someone's gone into labour, or a pig has escaped, or a fire broke out and everyone has to carry buckets, or, and this is surprisingly common, someone just needs to talk. Because in a world without therapy or journaling apps, sometimes you wake up and go cry to your friend at 1:00 a.m. There's also the wonderfully awkward tradition of bed warming among servants. Picture this: a lord wants his bed warmed before he turns in. So a servant lays in it for a while to heat it with body warmth. Then they get up and the lord slides in. That's not weird at all, right? Except sometimes servants just stay there, especially if the master's away or indifferent. You fall asleep in a bed that's not yours, hoping no one returns and demands you move at midnight. Now let's talk about nighttime fears. Because even if the sounds around you don't wake you, what's in your mind might. People in the Middle Ages had vivid beliefs about what lurked in the night. Witches, spirits, demons. The nightmare wasn't just a bad dream, it was a literal demon said to sit on your chest and steal your breath. Some folks slept with iron knives under their pillows to ward off evil. Others chalked protective symbols on their bed frames or tied garlic to the rafters. Historians still argue whether these were spiritual defenses or just medieval pest control. Either way, the room smells like a soup kitchen on vampire defense duty. You may wake up sweating, convinced something's watching you. It's not. Probably. It's just Agnes snoring again. Another issue: nighttime coughing fits. With smoky fires, closed windows, and zero ventilation, bedrooms are often full of stale air and ash. People cough all night. Kids wheeze. Grandparents clear their throats with theatrical flair. It's less sleep chamber and more open mic for respiratory distress. And let's not forget one very real, very itchy reason you might not sleep well: fleas, or lice, or bedbugs. Pick your pest. They're all there lurking in the straw, waiting to turn your sleep into a frantic scratching marathon. Some people took to smoking their beds with herbs, thyme, rosemary, even dried sage to try to drive them out. It worked, temporarily, until the bugs just got high and came back later. Here's a delightfully odd historical tidbit. Some medieval households employed night watchers. Their job: walk the town or estate checking for fires, thieves, or disturbances. They'd call out the hour as they passed by, often loudly enough to wake you up, just as you were drifting off again. 2 o'clock and all is well. Great. Thanks for the update, Gregory. Now my dream about inventing cheese wheels is ruined. All of this paints a picture of the medieval night as something less than tranquil. But somehow people adapted. They accepted the noise, the bodies, the movement, the smells. They learned to sleep in bursts, to nap in the afternoon, to lean on community and routine. You didn't need perfect silence or total darkness. You just needed enough peace to rest your bones and prepare for the next day's work. So you roll onto your side, tuck the blanket under your chin, and sigh. There's a mouse chewing something nearby. Someone farts. The rooster crow laughs like he's seen things. But your eyes grow heavy, and you sink into whatever sliver of rest the night still owes you. Because even in a world filled with noise and pests and dreams of ghost horses, sleep finds you eventually. And when it does, you take it, floors, snores and all. You wake up to a sharp clatter. It's still dark. Your eyes are crusty. Your mouth tastes like pickled cabbage left in the sun, and someone just stepped on your foot trying to reach the chamber pot. Congratulations, you've survived another night. But now comes a very medieval problem. How do you start the day when you barely got any sleep? And better yet, what if you didn't get any sleep at all? Because here's a fun twist, many medieval people didn't sleep in one continuous block. In fact, their entire concept of a good night's sleep was completely different from yours. Let's pull back the blanket of time, hopefully not the lice-infested one, and dig into what scholars now call segmented sleep. So picture this. It's the middle of the night, maybe midnight, maybe 1 in the morning. You're not dreaming, you're awake, and you're supposed to be. Why? Because medieval people often practiced what was known as the first sleep and second sleep pattern. They'd go to bed after sunset sleep for a few hours, then naturally wake up for a chunk of time, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, before drifting back into a second round of slumber. It wasn't seen as insomnia, it was normal, expected. In that in-between period, known to some as the watch people might get up, stoke the fire, say prayers, have a snack, even visit a neighbour. Yes, middle of the night social calls. Imagine answering your door at 2:45 a.m. to borrow a cabbage or discuss theology. You might also, shall we say, engage in marital duties. Several medieval texts suggest that this was the preferred window for intimacy after the body was rested, but before the day's work began. Scholars still debate whether this routine was culturally encouraged or just an opportunistic use of odd sleep cycles. Either way, you're getting less REM and more why is the bed moving again. Some monks and religious communities use this wakeful time for vigils and prayers. Picture yourself kneeling in the flickering candlelight of a cold stone chapel, whispering Latin hymns into the dark while others around you do the same. Sacred, sure, but also chilly sore need and likely accompanied by the occasional stomach growl. The wake period might even be when you work. Certain professions, like blacksmiths, bakers, or scribes, use this quiet in-between time to tend fires, finish scrolls, or prep dough. If you've ever met a baker who starts at 3:00 a.m., it's a habit with very old roots. But what if you can't get back to sleep? Well, in the medieval world, they didn't treat that like a personal failure. Instead, you might simply rise early and go about your day. Sleep wasn't hoarded. It was broken up, spread around, adjusted based on season, light weather, and workload. In fact, people often napped during the day, especially in rural communities, where early risers might catch a post-lunch snooze before heading back to the fields. Town labourers might nap during slower hours. Even monks scheduled meridiana, a midday rest. So despite fewer hours of nighttime sleep, medieval people often made up for it with small moments of rest stolen from the day. Sleep was flexible, like wool tunics and moral standards during tax season. But that doesn't mean they weren't tired. Imagine trying to get through your chores after a night of scratching at fleas, dodging your cousin's snoring, waking up for prayer, helping your neighbour find her missing goat, and then lying awake for 2 hours thinking about mortality and how you forgot to salt the fish. You rise with the sun, sort of. The rooster starts again, this time louder. Your joints ache. The fire's out. Someone's already boiling gruel and loudly banging spoons. There's ash on your tunic. A spider has claimed your shoe as its summer villa. And no one has brushed their teeth because, well, toothbrushes aren't a thing yet. So how do you wake yourself up? Coffee doesn't exist in Europe yet. Tea rare and expensive. So you splash some water on your face, cold, often gritty water scooped from a barrel, and maybe chew on herbs like parsley or mint to freshen your breath. Some people even chew juniper berries or licorice roots. There's no shower, no deodorant. If you're lucky, you own a linen shift, your underlayer that gets washed occasionally, while your outer clothes gather enough body grease to repel small rodents. And off you go, to market, to the fields, to the riverbank, to haul water to the castle, to peel turnips in the dim kitchen. And if you're a monk or nun, right back to prayer and study, where at least it's quiet enough to sneak in a discreet nap between psalms. Interestingly, some medieval folks believed that sleep was more dangerous than being awake, especially too much of it. Medical texts warned that excessive sleep could make you weak, sluggish, and vulnerable to disease. That's right. In a world with leeches bloodletting and unwashed meat pies, sleep was somehow still seen as risky. But it wasn't all harsh. Many people took comfort in routine. A rhythm emerged. Sleep, wake, rest, labor, eat, pray, sleep again. It wasn't perfect, but it had balance, especially in communities that weren't always racing the clock or obsessed with 8 hours straight under blackout curtains. Which brings us to a curious modern myth that humans are wired for one long, unbroken sleep. Turns out that might be wrong. Some researchers now believe that biphasic sleep, 2 chunks of rest separated by a wake period, wasn't just a medieval oddity. It could have been the norm for thousands of years. Only with the rise of artificial lighting, industrial work schedules, and strict school alarms did we shift toward our current model. So when you find yourself awake at 3:00 a.m., heart thudding, eyes wide, and brain shouting about overdue emails, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just accidentally medieval. And if you really want to go full medieval, you'd get up, light a candle, say a prayer, eat a hunk of rye bread, and wait for your second sleep to roll in like fog over the moors. Which it always does. Eventually, even if Uncle Hubert's snoring again and the rooster has no concept of personal boundaries. You're dreaming. Well, we're dreaming. It was something oddly comforting like swimming in warm stew or teaching a chicken to juggle. But now it's gone. Something stirred you. Maybe a breeze. Maybe a draft. Maybe the unsettling realization that your blanket smells exactly like pickled onions. You blink in the dark. And that's when it hits you, you're not alone. No, not just your family and the dog, and probably a rat named Gregory under the floorboards. You feel watched. Not in the Gregory wants your bread crust way. In the there's something in the shadows, and it may not be alive kind of way. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about medieval sleep. It wasn't just the living that shared the night. Tonight we enter the wonderfully bizarre world of superstition dreams and the supernatural. Buckle up, or rather snuggle in tighter, because things are about to get ghostly. People in the Middle Ages didn't separate dream life from waking life the way we often do now. Dreams were messages, omens, warnings, and sleep. It was a doorway. A thin, sometimes terrifying doorway between this world and the next. And once you closed your eyes, anything or anyone might come through. Let's start with the nightmare. You've heard the term before. Today, it just means a bad dream. But in medieval Europe, a nightmare wasn't just a feeling. It was a creature. The mare or mara was believed to be a dark spirit that crept into your room at night, sat on your chest, and stole your breath while you slept. Sometimes it took the form of a woman, sometimes a goblin. Always awful. You'd wake up paralyzed, gasping, heart pounding. And yes, this exact experience is now known as sleep paralysis, a well-documented phenomenon. But in the 1300s, you didn't call your therapist. You blamed an invisible butt-sitting goblin. People tried all sorts of things to keep the Mara away. They hung iron charms over their beds, placed knives under pillows, or slept with religious relics wrapped in cloth. Some painted crosses above the headboard. Others whispered protective prayers before sleeping, hoping their words would act like a medieval mosquito net for evil spirits. And it wasn't just mares. There were incubi and succubi demonic lovers who slipped into beds, seduced the innocent or the guilty, let's be honest, and drained their vitality. Historians still argue whether this belief arose from actual sleep disturbances or, guilt about those dreams. Either way, you didn't just worry about snoring, you worried about spiritual assault. Now let's move into dreams themselves. If you're a medieval peasant, your dream isn't just about what your brain chewed over during the day. It might be a prophecy. Maybe you saw a field of red poppies. Does that mean war is coming? Or you dreamed of your dead mother holding bread. Does that mean famine? You might ask the village priest, or a local wise woman. Some towns even had unofficial dream interpreters. Their qualifications vibes mostly. But they'd tell you that dreaming of water meant change. Fire meant conflict. Sheep meant fertility or taxes, or just actual sheep. Again, the interpretation game was very flexible, and then there were visits from the dead. You've just barely fallen into your first sleep when you see him, your cousin Thomas, who died last winter. He's standing in your dream holding a candle face, pale. You sit bolt upright. The air is cold, your mouth is dry. People believed that the dead might return through dreams, especially if they had unfinished business. Maybe they needed prayers to reach heaven. Maybe they were warning you about danger. Or maybe they were just cold and lonely in the afterlife and wanted one more chat before slipping back beneath the soil. These weren't always scary dreams. Sometimes they were comforting. A final goodbye. A reminder that life and death weren't so far apart. That your soul too would one day float between worlds. And maybe your great-great-grandniece would dream of you still clutching your walking stick and complaining about taxes. But of course, not all visitations were polite. The night was also the realm of ghosts. Wandering spirits, some peaceful, some vengeful, some just deeply confused. People swore they heard them knocking, rattling, whispering. If you slept near a graveyard, good luck. If you slept near a monastery that had moved bones without proper rites, yikes. You might sprinkle holy water before bed. Hang herbs by the door, mugwort sage yarrow. All believed to deter spirits. Some people refused to sleep near windows, fearing ghosts would drift in on the breeze. And for those bold enough to fight sleep demons head on, there were nighttime exorcisms. Yes, really. Priests would visit homes and say prayers over beds, drive out evil presences, and bless the sleeping space. Because your straw mattress, it was also a battleground. But it wasn't all terror and gloom. There was also hope woven into the night. In monasteries, sleep was sacred. Dreams were considered a gift from God. Saints appeared in visions offering advice or revealing truths. Some monks even studied their dreams, keeping little parchment notes beside their bunks to record them. The more vivid, the better. And there's one particularly lovely belief that still echoes in folktales, the midnight moment. It was said that if you woke exactly at midnight on Christmas especially, and you were pure of heart, you might witness miracles. Animals speaking, bells ringing by themselves, candles lighting without flame, a glimpse into the divine. Of course, most people woke up at midnight to pee or cough uncontrollably, but it's nice to think that just once a cow mumbled something profound into the frost. Let's not forget omens and sleep positions. Yes, how you slept mattered. Face up, vulnerable to spirit intrusion. Face down, bad for the lungs. Curled up in a ball, arms crossed, protective. Arms flung wide like you're auditioning for a musical Foolish. Sleep decorum, people. Some manuals even warned against sleeping under beams, claiming they channeled negative energy or caused bad dreams. You'd move your bed, or more likely your bundle of hay, a few feet over to avoid that cosmic pressure point. Feng Shui medieval style. And if all else failed, you made peace with the night. You accepted that darkness had its rules, that sleep wasn't a guaranteed safe zone, that dreams might teach or terrify or tickle, that the other world brushed up against your life and sometimes entered it in your most vulnerable hours. So you close your eyes again slowly. You whisper a prayer. You shift away from the draft. You try not to think about the fact that the chamber pot is directly under your bed and now disturbingly warm. And you slip into whatever world awaits you. A dream of flying over moors. A memory of your mother laughing. A shadowy figure who might be friend-foe. Or just your dog trying to steal your blanket again. Good night, brave sleeper. The dead, the dreams, and the darkness all nod in approval. You wake with a start and immediately regret it. Your neck is stiff. Your blanket has slid halfway to the floor, and your arm is pinned beneath your sleeping cousin, who has the breathing pattern of a medieval windmill with a lung infection. The fire has long since turned to ash. Morning light peeks through the shutters in uneven stripes like lazy spears across the floor. You sit up blinking and realize something. You're hungry. Of course you are. It's morning. Your last meal was a hunk of rye bread and something called pottage, and you burned it all off just by surviving the night. Time to fuel up. Welcome to medieval morning meals, a curious blend of tradition, superstition, and whatever your household managed not to burn or feed to the pigs last night. Let's begin with a concept that might surprise your modern sensibilities. Breakfast wasn't guaranteed. In fact, in many parts of medieval Europe, especially in the early Middle Ages, breakfast was frowned upon, a sign of weakness, gluttony, or even sin. Church teachings, especially for monks and nuns, often emphasized fasting in the early part of the day. Breaking the fast before Mass, or before a full work cycle was seen as indulgent. The righteous were meant to rise, pray, labor, and then eat. Preferably something boring. But of course, humans are famously bad at strict spiritual schedules when their stomachs start making barnyard noises. So by the later Middle Ages, most people, even the pious, had given in to the idea that maybe a little something in the morning wouldn't doom their souls. What did that little something look like? If you're a peasant, it's probably black bread rough and chewy made from rye or barley, maybe smeared with lard if you're lucky, or dipped into thin ale or watered wine. Yes, drinking alcohol in the morning wasn't taboo. It was standard practice. Water wasn't always safe, and ale had the added benefit of calories. A noble, on the other hand, might start with manchet bread, a finer white loaf made from sifted flour alongside cheese, a boiled egg, and perhaps something resembling jam if the cook was feeling fancy. There might be spiced wine, honeyed water, or even a sliver of cold meat left over from last night's feast. And for monks, they ate on a schedule that would make a modern dietitian weep with confusion. Depending on the order, they might rise before dawn, attend matins, then eat something modest like oat gruel or dry bread with a single fig. Figs were both sweet and symbolic. After all, what's breakfast without a little fruit-based morality? But not everyone got a full meal. Servants, apprentices, and labourers might only get food after beginning their tasks. Imagine waking at 4 a.m. to carry heavy buckets of slop to pig scrub floors with a rag the size of a mouse's shawl, and then finally getting a bowl of cold porridge and a few scraps of cheese that smell like regret. There's also the curious medieval fear of eating too early. Some physicians, remember, these are people who still believed in balancing your internal humours, claimed that eating right after waking was bad for the body. They warned that food wouldn't be digested properly, especially if you hadn't stretched, breathed deeply, and performed basic hygiene. Which fair. No one wants to eat next to someone who still has half a spiderweb in their beard. So what did you do before breakfast? You cleaned yourself, or tried. A splash of water on the face, a swipe with a linen cloth, maybe a chew of mint or parsley. Your teeth. No brushes, but perhaps a twig stripped of bark, chewed into bristles, and rubbed across your molars, like a tiny wooden hedgehog, and you prayed. Whether you were deeply devout or just afraid of your neighbour's ominous dream about owls, you offered thanks for surviving the night and hoped your breakfast wouldn't include weevils. Now about those dreams, morning was prime time for interpreting what you saw in the night. Families discussed their dreams over food like gossip. If someone dreamed of falling, it meant uncertainty. If they dreamed of fire, it meant passion, or possibly that someone had actually knocked over a candle, which is both symbolic and a safety hazard. And if someone dreamed of pigs, that one's a mystery. Could mean wealth, could mean greed, could mean your cousin stepped in something yesterday and the image stuck with you. Historians still argue whether these dream breakfasts were serious spiritual affairs or just a way to make awkward morning conversations sound deep. As you chew your crust and ponder symbolism, the village begins to wake. You hear carts rolling. The blacksmith's hammer starts its dull rhythm. Roosters crow again late but committed. Somewhere a baker slaps dough on a stone. And if you're near a river, there's the sound of washerwomen beating clothes rhythmically against rocks like some sort of angry percussion ensemble. Children are already underfoot, chasing chickens or each other or the wind. Adults prepare for the day's labour. And across town, the noble family sits in a high-ceilinged room, already eating their second course, while a servant reads scripture out loud, in a voice that suggests he'd rather be anywhere else. But even nobility had odd rules about food and sleep. Some medieval texts insisted that eating after sleeping too long made you sluggish. Others advised avoiding dairy in the morning unless it was winter, because obviously your body knows when it's December and adjusts accordingly. There were also warnings about combining certain foods. Bread and pears, maybe. Bread and garlic, definitely. Bread and eggs and garlic and ale. Well, now you're just showing off. You finish your modest breakfast. Maybe lick the last of the lard from your fingers. Maybe try not to think about how many people handled that bread before it reached you. You stand, stretch, and feel your joints pop like medieval bubble wrap. Time to go to work. And so ends the fragile, fleeting window between the dangers of night and the demands of day. That strange twilight where dreams cling to your hair and bread crust clings to your teeth, where ghosts are gone, but bills and backaches have just clocked in. But hey, at least you got some food in you, even if it tasted like floor dust and goat dreams. And in a few hours you might just sneak a nap, because medieval life, for all its rigidity, always left a little space for a sleepy afternoon head nod. And you'll need it, because tonight you're sharing a bed with Gregory the Rat again. Afternoon stretches on like a lazy cat in a sunbeam, and your eyes full of bread crusts and boredom begin to droop. But you don't dare lie down just yet, not unless you want to get scolded, tripped over, or mistaken for dead. Because while napping existed in the Middle Ages, it was a complicated affair. Sometimes allowed, sometimes sinful, sometimes literally the only thing keeping you alive during harvest month. So let's talk about one of the most underappreciated topics in medieval life, midday sleep and the rhythms of labour. You, dear listener, have already been up since the rooster's first cry. You've tilled, stitched, swept, or stewed something questionable in a clay pot. And now, sometime after the main meal of the day, known cleverly as dinner, yes, dinner used to be lunch, you're ready to collapse in a heap. Here's the good news: you probably can. For peasants, especially those who worked in the fields, the noon meat rest was a common custom. After a heavy labour session under the hot sun, workers often retreated to a shady spot under a tree in a barn, maybe against a cool stone wall, and took a nap. Nothing formal. Just 20 minutes of blissful unconsciousness maybe, with a bit of straw stuck in your hair afterward. This wasn't laziness, it was survival. Medieval farming didn't come with ergonomic tools, hydration breaks, or ergonomic knee pads. Your spine was doing its best impersonation of a question mark, and your hands were already hard as goat hooves by age 12. So yes, a nap was earned. But napping wasn't just for peasants. In monasteries where days were divided into chunks of prayer work and study, there was sometimes a short window, a siesta if you will, after the main meal before returning to tasks. Some monks napped upright in chairs to avoid falling into deep sleep. Others simply dozed during reading time, which makes sense when you've been awake since 3 a.m., reciting Latin and scrubbing floors. In noble households, things were different. Nobles didn't work the land, but they did attend councils, go hunting, or perform the emotionally exhausting labour of deciding which boots to wear. So yes, nobles napped too. Often on elaborate daybeds or chaise longues in withdrawing rooms with servants quietly tiptoeing around to keep the fire stoked, or fan away flies with bundles of herbs. But here's where it gets fun. Napping had moral implications. In many parts of medieval Europe, sleeping during the day was fine, if it was because you'd laboured hard, or were elderly, or ill. But if you were young, healthy, and napping, just because scandalous. Sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins, was often illustrated as a man sleeping under a tree while the world went to ruin around him. Preachers warned that too much sleep made the soul soft, the mind lazy, and the body prone to vapours, which sounds ominous and possibly smells like boiled cabbage. Doctors joined in writing in their medical treatises that day, sleep could unbalance your humours, especially if you slept in a draught, especially if you had just eaten, especially if Mercury was in retrograde and your toenails were itchy. Historians still argue whether people really followed these rules or just nodded politely and napped anyway. Let's talk briefly about sleep posture, because yes, it mattered. For naps and regular sleep alike, you were encouraged to lie on your right side first. Medical texts said this helped digestion. After a while, you could roll to your left, but not too long, or the body would become overheated, leading to brace yourself brain melting. That's not an exaggeration. One physician actually wrote that excessive daytime sleep, especially in warm environments, could cause your brain to soften like wax. So naturally, people began to fear sleeping too well, which is why some wore belt ties or even sharp pins beneath their clothes to prevent deep sleep. Because who needs comfort when you're worried about accidental brain stew? And then there's the nap guilt. Imagine this: you drift off in the hayloft sun, on your face birds, chirping Gregory the Rat, nestled affectionately in your armpit. And then you wake up and remember all the sins you might have committed by daring to rest. You whisper a quick prayer, check the sky for ominous cloud patterns, and vow to give up butter for a week just in case. Let's not forget that naps were gendered too. Women, especially those in noble circles, were more often allowed or even expected to rest during the day after all pregnancy embroidery and constant social performance were exhausting. But peasant women, they might grab a quick nap while nursing or between hauling buckets of water and chasing their fourth child away from the fireplace. And children. Children were encouraged to nap frequently, though not always for comfort. Sometimes it was simply to keep them out of the way. Go lie down before I send you to the goat pen again was a legitimate parenting strategy. And yet, despite all the warnings, restrictions, and sermons, people still napped. Because fatigue wins. Because the body has limits. Because sleeping in the warm hay after a bowl of lentils is one of life's few consistent joys. Even if you do wake up with a hayseed stuck to your forehead and a chicken sitting on your knee, of course there were those who took it too far. The town layabout, the chronic dozer, the guy who claimed to be meditating but was clearly just drooling into his tunic. These people were mocked, shamed, or roped into unpleasant chores the moment they stirred. So if you're going to nap, make it stealthy. The medieval nap was an art form, quiet, quick, and just unselfish looking enough to escape suspicion. Let's close with one final curiosity, waking dreams. Some believed that if you napped at the wrong time, especially midday in midsummer, you were vulnerable to fairy mischief. Yes, really. Napping in a ring of mushrooms, bold. Napping beneath a hawthorn tree, dangerous. Napping near a spring, where someone once saw a ghost dog with no face, absolutely asking for trouble. Stories tell of people who nodded off and awoke in strange moods, speaking in tongues, or convinced they'd been to another world. Scholars debate whether these tales were born of heatstroke suggestibility, or perhaps just the intoxicating effect of finally getting a break. So now back in your itchy tunic, belly full of bread, you recline in the shade. You close your eyes. You try not to dream of ghost dogs or seductively whispering fairies. You let the warmth sink into your bones. The world can wait. The hay is soft. The birds are singing. And if napping is a sin, you'll repent later with a second nap. You wake up to the soft, rhythmic clunk of hooves against the road. The sun has slanted westward, turning everything gold, the thatched rooftops, the puddles in the dirt path. Even the chickens look like they've been dipped in warm honey. A fly buzzes lazily past your face. You swat it half-heartedly and sit up. It's evening now, and the medieval world is shifting gears. Dinner. Yes again. And yes. It's still called dinner by some, though increasingly you'll hear it referred to as supper is on the horizon. But before the meal, before prayers and bed, and whatever bizarre dream-born rituals await you tonight, you get to enjoy one of the most magical parts of medieval life. Twilight. It's the liminal space between toil and sleep, between noise and silence, between the land of the living and the things they believed stirred in the dark. Let's set the scene. The fields have emptied. Tools lean against fences. Horses are stabled, sheep rounded up, and the day's last errands are being yelled across courtyards by people with impressive lung capacity. The air smells like hearth smoke, sweat-crushed grass, and something being fried that may or may not be an onion. You wipe the dust from your arms and return home. Your home, be it a wooden longhouse, a cramped city tenement, or a stone manor, has started to gather its people. Candles are being lit. Herbs are hung to dry. Someone hums tunelessly as they ladle stew into wooden bowls. This is the second wind, the moment before stillness when everyone shuffles around like sleepy ghosts in search of one last task to justify their existence. And it's here that you encounter one of the most peculiar and oddly comforting rituals of medieval life: evening storytelling. Because there's no Netflix, no TikTok, not even a cursed lute player on the town green. So you gather close by the fire or on creaky benches or around a low table and you talk. What do you talk about? Everything. What the Reeve said about the grain tax. What the bailiff saw in the woods last week. The time your cousin fell in the latrine. The dreams your aunt had about a black dog with human teeth, yes again. You also tell stories, real ones, exaggerated ones, completely invented ones, involving dragons that look suspiciously like geese. These fireside stories served every purpose: entertainment, moral instruction, social bonding, and good old-fashioned terror. A well-timed tale about a ghost in the nearby churchyard could keep children from sneaking out at night for weeks. And while you're listening, your body starts to shift gears. Muscles relax, shoulders loosen. Your stomach reminds you gently that it exists and would very much like a snack. Supper time, unlike breakfast, which was often meager, or dinner midday meal, which could be substantial supper, was typically lighter. You might get some bread, some cheese, a bit of cold meat, if any remains from earlier. Maybe soup or a barley stew. Maybe a few cooked beans that look suspiciously like they've been cooked 4 times already. If you're wealthy, supper might include wine. If you're poor, it's probably thin ale again, or small beer. A barely alcoholic brew meant to hydrate without the risk of contaminated water. And yes, you eat with your hands. Or a knife. Forks exist in some places, but are often seen as pretentious or vaguely demonic. Spoons are for soup and small children. You mop up whatever remains with bread and call it civilized. After supper, as the light fades entirely, something strange happens to the atmosphere. The village goes quiet, not because everyone's asleep, but because everyone is aware consciously, or not, that darkness is different. You know this in your bones. You've heard the warnings. You've seen the shadows shift in ways that defy explanation. Because the medieval night isn't just the absence of sun. It's a realm of its own. A separate territory with different rules, different risks, and very different residents. This is when the threshold rituals begin. Doors are bolted. Windows are shuttered. Iron objects, nails, horseshoes, shears are placed on thresholds or above door frames to ward off evil. Herbs like rue fennel or St. John's wort are hung over cradles, especially if there's a new baby in the house. Why? Because of changelings. It's believed that if you aren't careful, fairies or worse might sneak in during the night and swap your healthy infant with a sickly, otherworldly replacement. So people go to absurd, beautiful, desperate lengths to protect their loved ones. Salt is poured in circles. Bibles are left open near beds. Spindles are tied in knots no spirit would bother to untangle. And in the poorest homes, they simply sleep close together, bodies curled protectively around the smallest, like a warm-blooded barrier against the dark. Even animals are not spared the fear. If your cow stops producing milk, or your chicken lays a blood-speckled egg, it's not bad luck, it's witchcraft. Or spirits, or both. Historians still argue whether people truly believed in these nightly threats, or used them as convenient scapegoats for the natural randomness of life. But what's clear is that these beliefs were practiced with devotion, consistency, and deep cultural meaning. You now curled under your coarse blanket are not immune to these fears. You've heard the tales. You know the signs: the owl that hoots 3 times before midnight, the dog that refuses to cross the threshold, the lamp that flickers without wind. So you make your own small gesture. Maybe you whisper a prayer. Maybe you place your shoes backward under the bed, a trick meant to confuse any wandering spirits. Maybe you sleep with a tiny bone charm sewn into your hem, passed down by your grandmother, and smelling faintly of sage and soot. And then you wait for sleep to claim you. But before it does, you listen, really listen. The soundscape of medieval night is a concert. Few appreciate the groan of settling wood, the scratch of rats in the walls, the distant barking of a dog, the creak of leather straps as someone shifts in their sleep. And above all, silence. Heavy and deep. The kind of silence that presses gently against your chest, inviting you to surrender. You close your eyes. Outside, the stars blink into view, cold, distant, and dazzling. The moon climbs slowly, casting the earth in pale silver. Shadows stretch, merge, disappear. Inside, someone snores. Someone coughs. Someone murmurs in their dreams about sheep that talk and apples that sing. You smile in the dark, because while medieval life was harsh, uncomfortable, and occasionally flea-ridden, it also had its moments of unexpected grace, like this one. A full belly, a fire's glow, a story still hanging in the air, and sleep patient and certain, waiting just beyond the threshold. The night wraps itself around you like an old cloak, frayed at the edges, a little itchy, but deeply familiar. You stir beneath your woolen blanket, shifting to find a soft spot in the straw-stuffed mattress, which mostly contains actual straw, and a few things that aren't. One poke reminds you uncomfortably of a chicken bone, and you briefly wonder what happened to last week's stew. But comfort isn't the point here. You've entered the medieval night proper, and now we come to one of the strangest and most underreported realities of pre-industrial life. Segmented sleep. Yes, the idea that people sleep in one solid 8-hour block is relatively modern. Back in your candlelit, turnip-fed, soot-stained reality, your night's rest comes in 2 parts. First sleep and second sleep. You begin with first sleep drifting off shortly after darkness settles in. Maybe you went to bed just after supper. Maybe you stayed up another hour sitting by the hearth poking the fire with a stick that you will absolutely leave somewhere inconvenient in the morning. Either way, you fall asleep early, because the day started early, and because your body, uncursed by screens or LED lighting, follows the natural lullaby of the sun. This first sleep lasts around 4 hours, and then like clockwork you wake up, not groggy, not alarmed, just awake. This is completely normal. In fact, people expected it. There are references in medieval texts to watching in the middle of the night or doing things between the sleeps. It was a common, accepted, and even productive time of night. So what did people do? Well, anything that didn't involve too much noise or light. Quiet chores, mending, prayer. Some even read if they were literate and had a candle to spare. It was also a surprisingly intimate time for couples, both physically and emotionally. Doctors of the period even recommended it as the ideal window for marital relations. Not after a long day of digging ditches or boiling broth. But after your body has rested, your mind is calm, and the household is silent. Who knew the Middle Ages had better sleep science than modern dating apps? But it wasn't just pillow talk and sock repair. This in-between time also carried a sense of the mystical. Some called it the watching hour. A time when the veil between worlds thinned just a little, when dreams bled into waking thought, when ghosts, angels, or otherworldly visitors might wander through the quiet, peering in windows, whispering secrets, or demanding oats for some reason. People sometimes recorded visions seen during this in-between. Not dreams, not quite waking thoughts, but something in between. You can imagine it, can't you? Half asleep, half aware, with candlelight flickering like distant stars, and the wind creaking the rafters in a language only the dead remember. Some even believed this was the most honest time to pray. With distractions gone and your spirit tender from rest, you were closer to God. More sincere, more likely to hear answers, or at least feel heard. Monks, of course, made this middle of the night break official. Their lives were regulated by the canonical hours, and matins, a service of psalms and scripture, often occurred just after midnight. They rose sleep, still thick in their bones, to chant in echoing stone chapels, their voices threading upward through cold, damp air like incense. Imagine them rows of woolen figures hunched under hoods, the candlelight dancing off worn pages, the silence between verses louder than any city noise. Not all monks loved it, mind you. Some probably snored their way through the psalms. But the ritual held a moment of devotion in the stillest part of night. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep was universal or just common. Some claim it was mostly rural. Others argue it spanned classes and continents. What we do know is that this 2-part rhythm fades by the 17th century, right around the time street lighting, and the rise of nightlife begins to reshape people's schedules. But in your current world, the pre-electric, pre-binge-watching medieval night, it's simply how things are. Eventually, after an hour or so, you start to feel the familiar pull again. Second sleep calls to you soft and certain. Your mind slows, your limbs go heavy. You lie back down, perhaps murmuring a final prayer, or humming that lullaby your mother sang when you were small. Second sleep is often deeper, more dream-filled, less interrupted by roosters or rats or that neighbor who always seems to cough like he's dying. This is when the stranger dreams come, especially if you ate something questionable or slept too close to the fire. Dream interpretation was a minor obsession in medieval Europe, blending folk beliefs with Christian teachings and a touch of classical theory. Dreams of teeth falling out. Someone's going to die. Dreams of flying. You're becoming proud and should probably confess it. Dreams of frogs with human voices singing ballads about regret. Time to stop eating moldy cheese before bed. Some people kept their dreams to themselves. Others recounted them in the morning, usually to anyone nearby. whether they wanted to hear them or not. And while you dream, the world doesn't stop. Outside, the night watchmen shuffle through the streets, swinging lanterns and calling the hours. 10 o'clock and all's well, they cry, even if it isn't. In castles, guards pace the parapets, swords clanking softly against armour. In cities, curfews are enforced with heavy fines for anyone found wandering without a good excuse or a powerful friend. And out in the wilderness, wolves howl, owls shriek, foxes scurry, spirits real or imagined whisper through the trees. Yet somehow, despite all that, your second sleep holds you fast. And then comes dawn, not all at once. First the cold, a gentle creeping chill that nudges at your face, reminding you that morning is near. Then the sounds subtle at first, a rooster's tentative crow, a cartwheel bumping over a loose stone, a whisper from someone stoking the hearth, and finally light, the first silver blue threads weaving through shutters the soft golden promise of another day. You blink awake, your neck hurts, your fingers are numb, something's nibbling at your foot, probably a mouse with poor judgment. But still you've slept, twice, fully, weirdly. You stretch, yawn, swat the mouse, and rise into the promise of morning. Because in the medieval world, sleep wasn't just rest, it was ritual survival, vulnerability, and strangely, a form of community. A shared understanding that the night was long, unpredictable, and filled with strange rhythms we can barely understand today. You don't just wake up from medieval sleep, you return from it. And that, dear listener, is the beauty of this old world. Even in something as basic as sleep, it offers a glimpse into how differently time was once lived. Measured not in minutes and deadlines, but in shadows, bells, and the breathing of the hearth. So rise now, shake the hay from your hair, step out into the cold morning air. There's bread to bake, water to fetch, life to resume. But you'll carry the memory of that ancient two-part sleep with you. Maybe, just maybe, you'll try it tonight. You emerge from the tangle of sleep slowly, like a loaf rising in the dark, uneven, a little sticky, but inevitable. Your eyes open to the haze of dawn. Grey light spills in through wooden slats, tracing your face in chilly threads. Someone, probably the same someone every morning, has already stirred the coals back to life. You smell smoke, slightly sour sweat and porridge. Because porridge is inevitable. Your feet hit the cold floor. You curse softly, medieval style, maybe invoking the devil, maybe a goat with the devil, and start your day. But before we wander too far into your waking life again, let's address one final, deeply curious phenomenon of medieval sleep. Nightmare defense, because for all the charm of segmented sleep and the cozy hush of twilight fireside tales, the truth is, nights were not always peaceful. Sometimes sleep turns on you. And in medieval thought, that wasn't just bad luck. That was personal. You see, the nightmare, far from being a random fluke of brain chemistry and cheese digestion, was considered a supernatural assault. The term nightmare itself didn't originally refer to a bad dream. It referred to a mara, a malicious spirit or demon that would sit on your chest while you slept, suffocating you with terror. Think sleep paralysis, but with a folklore filter and about 6 times more doom. People described waking in the night, unable to move, heart-racing breath, stuck in their throat often, with the sensation that something was sitting on them, pressing down, watching, feeding. Of course, today we know this as a neurological condition, a glitch in the sleep-wake cycle, where your brain paralyzes the body for REM sleep, but consciousness sneaks in anyway. But in the Middle Ages, you were under attack. There are medieval illustrations, yes, actual paintings of demons, crouching smugly on people's chests. One famous example, The Nightmare, by Henry Fuseli. A bit post-medieval, but spiritually on brand, shows a woman sprawled across a bed, while a goblin squats triumphantly on her ribcage. It is as weird and uncomfortable as it sounds. To ward off this experience, people had strategies. Some slept with small crucifixes tied around their necks. Others placed protective charms beneath their pillows, like written prayers, wolf teeth, or in truly disturbing cases, bits of human bone believed to carry spiritual power. If you were lucky enough to have a local wise woman, or in some areas a cunning man, you could ask them to perform protective rites, burn certain herbs, or prepare a sleep sachet filled with calming botanicals like lavender chamomile or mugwort. You might also mutter specific incantations before bed, One such rhyme went something like, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John bless the bed that I lie on. 4 corners to my bed, 4 angels round my head. Comforting, yes, until you remember it's basically a ghost perimeter spell. And if all else failed, you simply slept sitting up. Why? Because it was believed the Mara needed a horizontal target. Deny it a flat chest, and maybe it would leave you alone. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stemmed purely from folklore or were exaggerated responses to real sleep disorders, trauma, or even carbon monoxide poisoning from poorly vented fires. Probably a blend of all three, but the result was the same. Sleep was not always a refuge, especially not if you were already vulnerable. Take women, for instance. They were considered particularly at risk, especially unmarried women, pregnant women, or those thought to be spiritually unguarded. Medieval guides on safe sleeping often focused disproportionately on women's habits, implying that a bad dream could open a door for all kinds of unseen dangers. It's not hard to see how fear and control could be braided together under the blanket of superstition. Then there were monks and nuns, who wrote disturbingly detailed accounts of demonic dreams, visions of temptation, spectral visits, or shape-shifting creatures whispering secrets in the dark. Sometimes these were chalked up to sin, other times just another reason to pray harder and tighten your belt. But here's the twist, not all nocturnal visitations were feared. Some were revered. A well-timed dream could be a divine message, a visitation from a saint, or even God. Entire religious movements sparked from people claiming to receive insight, prophecy, or command during the small hours of night. Monasteries collected these visions. Churches were built because of them. Pilgrimages launched on the strength of a dream. So the sleeping medieval body existed in a tug-of-war between the sacred and the sinister. Every time your eyes closed, you weren't just resting. You were crossing a border. And in case you're wondering whether you personally were protected from any of this, well, maybe. Let's do a quick inventory. Did you sleep with a charm or prayer under your pillow? Did you sprinkle holy water near the bed? Did you avoid beans at supper? Beans were believed by some to trap souls. Did you fall asleep in a state of grace, or heaven forbid, with unconfessed sins on your soul? If the answer to any of these is no, you may want to sleep with one eye open tonight, just in case. But all jokes aside, it's a reminder of how profoundly different their understanding of sleep was from ours. We think of it as restorative, a time for the brain to reset the body to heal. For them, it was that too, but it was also a portal. A dangerous, sacred, unpredictable journey that you embarked on every night, whether you liked it or not. And now, as your morning routine begins again, stoking fires, fetching water, dodging chickens, you feel a new appreciation for how resilient these people were. They faced days of endless work, discomfort, disease, and uncertainty. And still they slept, even if sleep was fractured, feared, and occasionally featured goblins sitting on their lungs. And they found ways to make peace with it, through charms, stories, routines, and rituals that help them claim a little peace in a chaotic world. So tonight, when your head hits your thoroughly modern pillow and your phone buzzes for the 3rd time, and the fan hums gently beside you, remember the world you've just walked through. A world where sleep was not a luxury. It was a daily leap of faith. So now you know, the medieval night was no silent void. It pulsed with rhythm, broke into pieces, whispered secrets through the rafters. And somehow, even through curses, goblins' cold toes, and scratchy wool blankets, people found rest. But before we step back into the waking world entirely, there's one final piece to this odd candlelit puzzle: how people actually ended their nights. Because in a world without alarms or clocks or even roosters that obeyed a schedule, how did you know it was time to wake up? Simple, you listened. You listened for bells. In towns and cities, monasteries rang their bells for lords, the morning prayer, usually around dawn. The ringing rolled over rooftops and pastures like slow thunder. If you were within hearing distance and you hadn't totally stuffed your ears with wool against the cold, you rose with it. For rural folk, the bells might be miles off. So instead, you watched the sky, or waited for the village crier who often walked through the hamlet calling out the hour, or announcing news, or simply muttering about how hungry he was. And if you were in a wealthy household, maybe you had a servant, a groggy, resentful one whose job was to wake you, possibly with a poke, possibly with water, possibly by opening your window shutter just enough to blind you with the sun and deeply regret your noble birth. That's right, even waking up had class differences. But regardless of how you were summoned back to reality, there was always a ritual to start the day. For most, that meant a prayer. You sat on the edge of the bed or whatever combination of planks, sacks and straw you called a bed and gave thanks that you woke at all. You asked for protection, patience, and that the fleas would show mercy today. Then came the washing, such as it was. Water was usually cold. Soap was arguable. You wiped your face with a damp cloth, maybe scrubbed your hands with ashes if you had no soap, and if it was a special day, possibly scented the cloth with herbs or vinegar. You weren't getting spa treatment, but hey, you weren't dead yet, so that was a win. Next, you dressed, which for most people was barely a step. You'd either slept in your clothes or near them. No walk-in closet, no linen spray, no mirror selfies. Just layers of wool, a belt, maybe a hood if you were feeling fancy. If you were nobility, more layers, more buttons, and more fabric to trip over. And finally, breakfast, which wasn't really a thing. Many medieval people didn't eat first thing. There was a belief, particularly among religious orders and serious thinkers, that eating early showed lack of discipline. So if you were being virtuous or poor or both, you waited until mid-morning. If you were a labourer though, you'd grab whatever was left over from the night before, cold porridge bread, maybe beer, if water was risky. And yes, they really drank beer at breakfast. It was low alcohol and safer than many water sources. Also, if you're going to shovel manure all day, you probably deserve a buzz. And so, with groggy prayers, said faces washed, fleas grumbled at, and a chunk of stale bread in hand, you headed into the day. But here's the thing, no matter what happened next, whether you were off to plough a frozen field, attend a royal council, or stir a pot of cabbage soup for the 15th day in a row, you carried the night with you. Because the medieval night wasn't just a break between chores. It shaped you. It was when fears surfaced, when souls were thought to roam, when the heavens opened, or demons crawled in. It was quiet, but never empty. Peaceful, but rarely safe. And somehow, even with nothing but a candle stub and a scratchy blanket, you made it through. You adapted. You adjusted. You found your rhythm. In the dark. Historians still argue whether the modern sleep cycle, with its electric light, its stress schedules, its glowing rectangles, is better or worse. Whether we've gained efficiency at the cost of rest. Whether maybe we were meant to sleep like they did, in 2 parts, with a little time in between, to think, pray, or sit in stillness. And who knows? Tonight, maybe try it. Let yourself wake. Stay up a little. Listen to the quiet. Write a dream down. Whisper to the ceiling. Sit in that odd, wonderful space between wakefulness and rest. You're not alone there. Across centuries, someone else did exactly the same thing. They whispered prayers. They wrapped themselves in wool. They fed the fire with one hand and stroked the cat with the other. They looked out the window at the stars and wondered who else might be awake. And now it's time to return to them one final time. To wind down. Now the candle has burned low, its flickering glow soft and golden against the stone. The hearth has quieted, its embers sighing gently in the dark. The night outside is still the wind, only a whisper through the thatch. And you, listener, you've walked the length of this ancient night. Through dreams and darkness. Through prayer and silence. Through straw beds, wool blankets, and the quiet bravery of every soul who once closed their eyes without knowing if they'd open them again. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of centuries ease from your shoulders. No more goblins. No more night watchmen. No more awkwardly timed bells or strange dreams about frogs who owe you money. Just the hush. The hush of a world long gone, but not forgotten. Of a time when sleep was holy and terrifying and simple and strange. Let it wrap around you like that heavy wool blanket. Let the flickers of history settle. Let the ghosts of old night lives fade. And in the space they leave behind, let there be peace. Sleep now, soft and slow. You're safe. End of script. Sweet dreams.